Non-Duality Speaker Reviews, Volume 4. There apparently appear to be non-duality speakers humanly corporeally appearing as a human corporeal manifestation, as a human corporeal form, what is referred to as a human corporeal manifestation, as a unit of local qualia consciousness energy form, local in a sense that the appearance is in space and time, and yet not of space and time. The appearance of a human corporeal manifestation is mingling with absolutely everything else that appears. It's not an additional human corporeal form, and there are no human corporeal forms removed. No. Every human corporeal manifestation that ever was, ever will be, and ever has been, is contained within absolutely everything. How that distribution of human corporeal manifestations is dispersed throughout the universe, nobody will ever know. The countenance is too great. Therefore, it is absolutely futile and unnecessary to conjure up the idea that although the idea of labeling everything as though there's something within everything and then there's anything, that absolutely everything can appear as anything, and then within the appearance of anything there can be apparent appearances of something. But the content of anything, within everything, within absolutely everything, does not require identification that way. The human corporeal manifestation had always been thought to be so. If the human corporeal manifestation has been thought to be so, how and why was it thought to be so? The mental thought system. Is that the purpose for a mental thought system? No. It is simply what appears as the content of absolutely everything. Therefore, absolutely everything is non-separation. Absolutely everything is non-dual in nature. There's nature. It is called nature. It is a natural nature, undisturbed. If describing nature that has been appearing in space and time for a duration that even surpasses anybody's claim to know how much time that nature's been around. Also the planet. The story of Earth has been told by the historian. The historian and groups of historians, of course, here goes the Conjuring all over again. Everything that's thought via the mental thought system is obviously conjured. Now, once there is a collapse, of this idea, this thought of individuality, of a separate sense of self, of an individual person that's living in the world, that has its own free will and choice, that is living its own life, and that it has its own body to experience life, that it believes, there's the mental thought system, claiming the human corporeal local unit of quality of consciousness energy form, that manifestation that's temporally in space and time, temporarily impermanently, the Maya. The impermanence, impermanently appearing, along with everything else, since apparently time is timing the apparent appearance of everything that appears. Therefore, absolutely everything that's appearing is both real and unreal, observable and unobservable, knowable and knowable, knowable and unknowable for nobody, for no separate individual person. And that is the same throughout the universe. And yet, nobody can claim to know that. It is simply being stated. Why is it being stated? It is being stated because all human corporeal manifestations that are utilizing or using, verbalizing speech to express, and there are, of course, seemingly so, many different ways that a human corporeal manifestation can express. It can express via feelings, emotions, express via speech, express via apparent appearance of motion, movement, human corporeal bodily movements. And all of this is apparently appearing as though it is happening in space and time. And yet it's not a happening. It's a manifestation of being. Beings are not happening to be. Beings that are of some type of life form or some type of energetic movement that is a representation of life. Now, life presents itself, in a matter of speaking, as an energetic movement of aliveness, spacious aliveness. And this spacious aliveness is the energetic movement that apparently appears to be part of what apparently appears within the apparent appearances as time is timing those apparent appearances. And those apparent appearances can apparently appear separate, but they are not. They're mistakenly identified as though separate. These mistakes are so easily, convincingly so, that even after what apparently appears to be an after, regardless of how subtle that may have apparently appeared to have occurred, the collapse of a self-identification of a conjured self, although that collapse apparently appears to happen in space and time, that happening that was thought to be occurring or happening to the body-mind that was self-identifying itself as though it had my life, my body, my personal experiences, when in fact that was never so. It was simply not recognized because of the nearly unanimous, it apparently appeared to be a unanimous agreement with all the other apparent appearances of all the other self-conjured selves around that body-mind. And that body-mind, as it represented and was expressing as an infant, as an innocent child. Now, this communication, this message, is not actually coming from anywhere. The reason why it apparently appears to be coming from a human corporeal body-mind is because, simply because, everything that appears that is referred to using the English language to communicate the appearances within absolutely everything. There's the apparent appearance of content. The apparent appearance of content is seemingly so simply because there is the time, as though it's a continuum, a time that is timing the appearance of everything. But everything is just a constant appearance. It doesn't require time to appear as absolutely everything does. Is everything doing its own appearance? In a sense, this could be stated in this manner, using the English language to express that. Is that an idea? That's an observation. And it's not the observer that's observing an observation. It is an immediate recognition. In other words, no thing is interfering any longer, as it once seemingly had been the case for and to and by what? A separate sense of self, the conjured self. The conjured self entertained the idea that although it believed and was convinced to believe a conjured self's own entertainment of thoughts and ideas, was convinced that it was entertaining the thoughts for, by, and to itself, and that it was experiencing life for, by, and to itself. For itself. It claimed the self as its own self, which was all conjured. All of it is entirely a complete conjuring. That complete conjuring, it took time, of course, to develop. In all the stories of all of the conjured selves that have ever been thought to be so, and those conjured selves that are still believing that they are separate from everybody and everything else, in that societal structure that believes in that societal structure that there is one, especially among the English-speaking parts of the earth, as the story of Earth goes, as when we're referring to, of course, the human corporeal manifestations, human beings. The human beings, spiritual beings having human experiences? Not quite. No. This is not about spirituality. This is not about any-ality. This is not about any ism. When referring to absolutely everything, it appears as it does. Although it is unknowable how absolutely everything appears as it does, there can still apparently appear to be conversations about that. This is how even the communication regarding non-duality, Advaita Vedanta, the Upanishads and the Gita, the very first conjurings, yes, even the Gita and even the Upanishads were conjured. There were human corporeal manifestations that were roaming and wandering about in nature. Did they purposely wander about in nature for some intent? Were they seeking something? They could be construed as the very first human corporeal manifestations as seekers. They were the very first seekers. As far as that which has been expressed, human corporeally so, in the Ancient of Days, time that had apparently appeared to have occurred during a timeline of thousands of years, if not millions of years. Quite a far stretch from many of the religious beliefs, especially one of the newest religious beliefs, in terms of new and old, whereby time has been kept track via calendars, which we refer to these calendars that are assumed or presumed to be accurate, but the accuracy is still in question. Is this year 2019? Does anybody question that? Seriously doubt it. If nobody questions that, then that obviously refers to time as the illusion that it is. Since time is illusion, 2019, 2018, any year, does it really matter? In the grand scheme of things, there is no grand scheme. For anybody to claim that everything that appears absolutely full, complete, whole as it is, how can that be a scheme? That is not a scheme. It is thought to be a scheme because that is the conjured idea. And yet, absolutely everything appearing as it does, whole, complete, perfect as it is unknowable. It's ungraspable. It cannot be called anything, defined anything, because it is absolutely everything, which includes that which is unknowable, that which is unobservable, and that which is unreal. But not exclusively so. Absolutely everything is both. That can never be understood because it's not a knowing. It can never be communicated using absolutely any language. No language can communicate how and why the infinitudinal complexification of absolutely everything, all that is and all that is not, empty fullness, apparently appearing both real and unreal, unobservable and observable, unknowable and knowable, to nobody, for no apparent reason, meaning, and purpose other than of its own accord and volition, as what is and what is not empty fullness. simply because time is timing the apparent appearance of absolutely everything. But nobody can understand that, simply because there are no separate entities, separate beings, separate human corporeal manifestations that can claim that they know and understand and can also observe and turn absolutely everything into a scheme or a theory, a big theory of everything. All of these attempts are futile. The futility of attempting to understand the complexity of the entire universe and how absolutely everything appears, there is no way that that can be apprehended. It cannot be known. It cannot be conceived. It cannot be perceived. Simply because there are no perceivers, there are no conceivers, there are no observers, there are no doers, there are no knowers. Therefore, it's not even worth discussing, is it? And yet, these discussions regarding Advaita Vedanta and non-duality go on. They apparently appear to go on. Now, since they're simply going on, is there a meaning, reason, or purpose for these conversations regarding all that is? Empty fullness, spacious aliveness, simply this? It's not necessary. But it's neither. It's neither necessary and it's not necessary. It's both. Where is their necessity then? Well, the necessity apparently appears to be so, as a necessity, to communicate that which is attempting to describe absolutely everything, but not to put it into a book or literature, which is why it's unnecessary in that sense to write a book about non-duality or Advaita Vedanta. Although the books have already been written, those are simply expressions. And there are a multitude of innumerable expressions in literature. Just another way to express writing something down. It has been written. Let it be written. So let it be written. So let it be done. You know, there's all these different sayings regarding how it had been conjured. There's that self-importance again. The human race, as is described as the human corporeal manifestation, the collective human corporeal manifestations. Notice the variety, though. The variety is very similar to that which is demonstrated out in nature, in the environment. Look at all the different life forms. Observe that. Notice that. What is noticing that? Well, absolutely everybody. Everybody is capable of observing, but are they each separate observers? It is as though it's seemingly so that there is a collective group of human corporeal manifestations that are various different appearances. They're appearing in so many different ways that it cannot be pinned down. Therefore, if it cannot be pinned down, that means what? It doesn't mean anything, but it is noticed that absolutely everything contains any thought form that could be entertained, any thought and idea. The mental thought system is not an independent stream. It just apparently appears to be an independent stream. But it is likened to another strand in a thick piece of rope, so to speak, using an analogy loosely. So there is a life stream, and then there is the consciousness stream, or the mental thought system of consciousness as consciousness, and then there's a time stream. And all these streams are likened to rivers, tributaries. It's an attempt to use another analogy loosely via the English language, and this has been described similarly in the Gita. It's been described in the Upanishads, but in a more kind of a the paradoxical way of speech, that it is and it isn't, it's real and it's unreal, both observable and observable, knowable and unknowable. Those type of paradoxical phrases that are transliterating from the Sanskrit original tongues, the original writings of the Upanishads and the Gita, and then directly to a translation of using the English language to express. Does it matter? Of course not. And yet, since it can be spoken of, since a satsang can be held, since groups of people can get together. Now, when I say groups of people, we're referring to, of course, groups of the obvious human corporeal, temporally temporary units of local quality of consciousness energy forms as they appear. And these are all appearances, all manifestations. Absolutely everything is appearing. It appears this way of its own accord and volition, though. If that is the case, and all human corporeal manifestations are mingling with that, then there is the accord and volition. Not of each separate human corporeal manifestation, but of its own accord and volition. If that's the case, then that's the being. That's the beingness. And that's the beingness. That is an energetic movement of beingness, mingling with absolutely everything that appears as it does. Of its own accord and volition. That accord and volition was once thought to be the free will and choice that the conjured self, the self-conjured self, had been believing in that. Simply because, why? The information was imparted to that human corporeal manifestation when it was an infant. It was an innocent child. It was already not only knew, it was just simply being. It didn't have to know that it was being. It was in bliss. It was so entrenched with the connectivity with absolutely everything. And that's the innocence. In that innocence, it didn't need to know that it was being. It didn't need to figure out anything. It did not need to be informed. That is the mental thought system. That is to cognize. That is cognition. That is to conjure thoughts and ideas and entertain thoughts and ideas. For what? For whom? See, it is when the idea of the I, the me, the whom, then the us and the we, and then the societal structure, and we are all in this together, and then all of that began to what? At some point. At what point? Well, in space and time. Is space and time necessary for everything to appear as it does? No, not necessarily. And yet, time apparently appears to be timing the apparent appearances of everything, of absolutely everything. Now, has this ever changed? Has this ever deviated from the manner by which the ordinariness of absolutely everything appearing? There's no deviation. It's obvious. No deviation. There's only apparent appearance of change and aging and shifts of energetic movements. It is still contained with absolutely everything. How is that contained? See, nobody knows. That is unknowable. To claim that absolutely everything is contained within some area of space, nobody knows that. But the astrophysicist is still going to attempt to come up with an explanation, come up with some type of long mathematical formula I mean, just it'll take up 4 walls in a room of mathematical formulas to say, oh, okay, well this is tied in with this other type of energetic movement that's going on, and yeah, there's the string theory, and there's all these other theories. We need to take into consideration the delta T's, because there's light photons, and that tells us what the pixel rate is, and then the time continuum is flowing at a certain velocity, and light is a constant. And see, it goes on and on like that, where the scientist, the astrophysicist, it is as though they cannot leave absolutely everything to simply be. They can't leave it alone. It appears as though they refuse to leave it alone. That they have to know. That's how strong that the energetic movement of knowing is. The knowledge base in knowing. To possess a knowledge base of knowing more and continuing to believe that there's more to know. Absolutely everything that could ever be known cannot be extrapolated. It cannot be grasped. It cannot be seized. No manner of amount of books can ever write about absolutely everything. There's far too much content. It's ridiculous to believe that just one body-mind complex action figure, just one small mind, a brain, if you will, of a body-mind that believes it has its own mind, to conjure up these ideas and to say, I have an original idea. I think I'll write a book about it. I know what I'll call it. The Big Theory of Everything. Yeah, okay. Well, I seem to have the credentials. No one will listen to anybody that does not have credentials in society. So I need to come up with the Big Theory of Everything. So that it satisfies what? Well, it satisfies a lot of curiosities. But it can never satisfy. It's never satisfied, because it will always believe that there's more knowing out in the universe. It's not satisfied with what it believes it's knowing. But see, that's the conundrum. That's the paradoxical situation there, with a sense of a separate self. Because they are so convinced to believe that they can know about absolutely everything. It's unknowable. It's unknowable. And yet, the attempts are there. The beingness, just simply be. Let it be, because it's going to manifest as it always has been, regardless of any conjured selves, beliefs, ideas, concepts, theories, any type of conjuring or entertaining of an idea that's cognized. So consciousness is not all there is. You hear that a lot, though, don't you? Well, I say, well, don't you? Well, that which was relegated to believing to be part of society. Now, speaking this way is quite daring, in a sense. As though there is this human corporeal body mind that has figured absolutely everything out. There's nothing to figure out. No, it only apparently appears to sound that way to what? To the knower and the doer. And especially the seeker. The seeker is going to come across this and say, what in the hell is this about? It is absolutely insane. It's insanity. It's the craziest thing. It's the craziest idea, craziest thought, craziest concept ever heard on this entire planet, the story of Earth. This message regarding Advaita Vedanta, it will sound and seem extremely crazy when it is expressed because of the self-identification that was so convinced, and still, if this message is heard this way, of course using the English language that is, it will be considered absolute craziness. The reason why it will sound crazy is simply because there is still what? There is still the sense of a separate self that believes it has its own body, its own life to live, its own free will and choice. And so, what does it do? It can't flee. So there's that fight or flight concept that's used in psychology. Psychological, I mean, of course, that's the book learned stuff, the academia. But that's definitely far removed from what we are referring to regarding all is simply non-separation. It's non-dual. Absolutely everything is not two of anything. And to say that it is oneness is referring to, of course, a collective that everybody or every human corporeal manifestation as a body, as a human body, that appears mingling with absolutely everything that appears as it does. That's that spiritual idea, that new agey idea, that the oneness is naturally and inertly agreed upon by every single body, mind, human corporeal manifestation at any age. In the innocence it's there. In the innocence of a human corporeal manifestation as an intimate, it is there. It is mingling very, very tightly and closely. It is coalescing in a natural way. In other words, its energetic movement in that innocence is that oneness. It is one with absolutely everything. And it doesn't even have to try. It doesn't have to make an effort. It doesn't have to know. It doesn't have to do anything. It's just simply being. And if it happens to appear as a human corporeal manifestation, then it's that. It's appearing as that. But there are so many examples of life forms that are expressing what? They're expressing all of this. Simply this, which is spacious aliveness. It's not even just consciousness. That's part of it. That's part of absolutely everything. But absolutely everything does not require consciousness. Why? Because that's knowing. That's knowledge. That's a human corporeal body mind that's saying, okay, I think I could know enough to get by. If I know enough to get by what? Well, to get through my life. Well, no. You don't have to know anything regarding being. You just simply be. Do you have to know about the being? No. Did you get up this morning and say, well, man, I have to know about how I'm going to be now. Oh, man, I'm going to have to think about this now. How am I going to be today? Let's see. How do I need to present myself to society or to the world? When I go to my job, I got to put my work face on. See, that's accommodating. That's the idea and belief that this human corporeal manifestation can no longer just simply be. No, it has to act out. It needs to do something other than simply being. It needs to act in a certain way that apparently appears to be something appropriate. Appropriations. So there's the conjurings again. And there are the human laws that say, well, in society, you're going to have to do certain things. There's the doing. Well, before you can do them, though, you need to know. So that is why it's so important to stay in school. Stay in school. However, how else are you going to integrate into society unless you go to school? There's where you will learn. No learning is required, obviously, to be. Do we learn ourselves to be? No. Do we have to do ourselves into being? No. There it is. Notice how ordinary that is. Notice how obvious it is. But if you cannot notice that, and when I say you that you think you are, that separate sense of self that you believe that you are, and how can you prove that you are a separate person, that you believe that you are? Birth certificate. It's always down to that, isn't it? And another one is the birthright, the ancestral line. Those are the two main components that reinforce a separate sense of self. And especially also reinforces society. And it continues to go on to this very day. And it will continue on. What is going to stop this societal structure from continuing? Is anything going to stop that? Well, the only thing that's going to cease that from happening any further will, of course, be absolutely everything of its own accord and volition. Therefore, whatever may arise that has yet to arise, to do what? To not really do anything. It's just simply appearing. All the energetic movements are appearing, and then is each human corporeal manifestation have a responsibility of some type? There is the conjuring idea, because in order to integrate into society, what do you have to be? Well, you have to be economically viable. You have to have some kind of skill that you learn, and that's why you go to school. It's to help you learn, help you know, so that you can do. So you can do what? Integrate in society, and then become the best person you could ever be. And then that person, separate self, ego, all the things that are associated with separateness. And yet, it was already being all of that. In fact, it wasn't really being what society expects. Okay, this societal structure, this idea of a utopian society, and that's another one. This utopian idea of the idealism, the idealistic idea, the perspective of everybody communicating with one another immediately, and everyone being kind to one another, and just that type of recognition. That was always the case whilst the innocent child was there. And then what happened? Indoctrination, conditioning, then the indoctrination, of course, into the idea that there is a societal structure that must be adhered to. There are human laws and morals and standards and things of that nature that must be adhered to, because if they're not, what happens? Then the societal structure is not going to be stabilized enough or stable. It's never been stable, has it? Of course not. A societal structure cannot be stable. Why? Because there's all of these different conjured selves that believe that, wait a minute, I'm going to have to compete. It's every man, woman, and child for themselves. That's the idea. Oh, the strongest survive. There's the other one. There's the other contention that life for me must be planned out, and I must have some type of a way of figuring out how I'm going to interact. What do I need to do? What do I need to know? It's the doing and the knowing. Meanwhile, what's going on with the being? Tucked away, way back there. Yeah, you already know how to be. That's what society will tell you. Oh, you know how to be. You know how to, behave. No, you know how to be nice. You know how to mind your manners. All that sort of thing. So, yeah, leave that behind. What's important is what you know and what you're going to be doing. Oh, that is the main thing. Why? Because there's this idea of community is very strong, and the family. It's not to say that there shouldn't be families, there shouldn't be communities, but that is how the societal structure remains intact, as though that's the best idea. To do what? To live. What do you mean living? You're already alive. You're being. No. That's not good enough. You need to know about the living. You need to know about how to live, because you don't know that yet. So you need to go to school and figure that out. You don't know that yet. You're too innocent. You don't know. That's what you're told when you're a child. If you come up with these questions and you ask your parents, certain questions about, especially the one that that often happens, is about the religious stories. And this body mind went through that in an area of the United States called the Bible Belt, okay, in the Baptist religion. Now, just consider this story. Just consider this story about what is there a point going to be made? But in a sense, this story is how it affects nearly every single next generation. Depends on what they are going to be exposed to. What are they going to be exposed to? Well, obviously, of course, nature and the environment, and then you need to understand about acquiring some type of shelter. You need to at least be able to shelter yourself away from storms and inclement weather and things of that nature. But this story is about simply being. And all innocent children, that's referring to the energetic movement of a human corporeal unit of local quality conscious energy form, this innocence is already naturally mingling with absolutely everything. And absolutely everything is perfect, it's whole, it's complete, it's the bliss, it's the nirvana, it's more, it's the best way of being. It is the best way of being because it is as though there is an allowing and going along with the flow of absolutely everything that arises naturally as it does. It's going to arise naturally as it does anyway, regardless of what anybody might think about that, especially those that are still steeped in the idea of a self-conscious self, the self-identification, the selfing, all that which describes an identification of a singular individual self-sufficient, or the idea that of a self-sufficient self. I am self-sufficient. I'm living my own life. I have my free will and choice to do so. I know that I'm a special person because I have a birth certificate to prove it. I have a name, I have a birth name, I have a birthright, and I'm part of society, and I'm proud where I was born, I'm proud of the country I was from, and see how it goes on and on and on about the pride, the ego, all of those types. I'm not saying that it's wrong, right or wrong, just simply saying this is how the setup has been going on. It appears that way. Prior to an infant, let's say, prior to the human corporeal manifestation begins to develop and tries to figure out what in the heck is going on around me, eventually that happens. Wait a minute, how did I get here? Wait a minute, what is here? What is this crazy place? Why does it seem to be crazy? And why are all these people running around doing all these crazy things? It looks like, and how come they're so mean, cruel to each other? What made them that way? Why are they like this? See, all these questions, because it had been innocent. Now, referring to the story, man, do you have about 56 years? We say it would take about 56 years to try to explain this story. Every single body mind, depending on this duration, this indeterminate duration in space and time that it is apparently appearing to spend, each body-mind is spending a certain amount of time. And as far as time goes, that can be kept track, okay? Such as, of course, a watch. The seconds are ticking, tick, tick, tick. Seconds, and then 60 seconds. The countenance, of moments of each second going by. That's a minute, and then you add so many minutes to an hour. You got 60 minutes to an. No, I was always terrible at math. I'm not even going to bother with it. This body mind has always been terrible. The mathematics that I was learning, I needed assistance. Thankfully, my missus, my partner, Bev, she helped me with the algebra part, the algebra 2 and all of that. And yet, the physics, the real extreme complicated stuff, I get that. That's unusual, in a sense, as far as an approach to information and that type of thing, and then processing information. What is processing information? Nobody processes information. What is information anyway? Well, it's just, the sounds reverberating, and then there's meaning behind them somehow, and then these meanings are relegated to various languages, and all of that really doesn't matter, of course. Does anything really matter? Why are we bothering to talk about this subject anyway? Well, see, there it is. It doesn't matter to anybody. Why? Because there's nobody for that to matter to. See? There it is again, the paradox. No matter how you try to spin it, it's that way. And these questions have been asked, and I've been noticing. What's noticing? Well, it's just going through these various presentations, instead of actually taking this body-mind and apparently appearing to be in that room with that non-duality speaker and these other group of people that are asking questions. Without being in that room, I'm telling you, if this body-mind was ever at any of these satsangs, they wouldn't be long enough. No, I mean, if you look at the presentations prior here, you'll see some of them are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours long. Does this body mind have a lot to say? No. It's simply expressing. Man, but it apparently appears to have a lot of information it wants to express. Why does it feel the need to express like that? It's not necessarily need. It's just simply a natural expression. Just as natural as a bird that's that's singing the song of a new day, or a bird that is singing the end of a day. So, bird song, is that a communication of some kind? Well, if you understand about birds, and if you studied birds, then you would understand that each bird has its own chirp, its own sound, its own. How does that happen? See? There it is. It's the same with the human corporeal manifestations. They're each expressing in so many different unique ways, but they cannot be counted. There's billions of different types of expressions, just as there's the countenance is so great of all the life forms. You can't name them all. So the naming is futile now. In the religious circles you would see in Christianity, which this body mind was deeply entrenched in Christianity at first. Let's say at first. If we're to take the story of this body mind, of course every body mind has a story to tell. It can tell a story. It's just another story of another body mind. That's all it is. And then all of that really didn't happen, though. See, that's the extraordinary mystery about this whole appearance of absolutely everything. It's so extraordinary when a human corporeal body mind can entertain the idea for so many years and be convinced that it was separate from everybody and everything else, absolutely everything. It had never been separate from that. It never was. It was always mingling with that. And it was in the innocence. How it was doing that. Was it doing it? No. It was being. In the innocence of being. To enter the kingdom, that being would have likened to the eyes of a child. I can recall that somewhere. That seems to make sense, though. That as the innocence of a child, in order to enter the kingdom of everything, of absolutely everything, and in the universe there are many mansions. You know, and these many mansions could be other dimensions, and there could be other types of ways of life, perhaps, or ways of beingness, perhaps. Now, these ideas that are entertained, are these just fanciful imaginings? Could be. They could be imagined, right? But nobody knows. Now, it has been said, it has been stated, that when the, let's say, the guru-disciple situation, scenario, a disciple asks the guru, it says, Guru, is there an afterlife? What happens after death? And then the guru replies, I do not know, for I am not a dead guru. So, in a sense, that means that nobody knows. If a human corporeal manifestation is no longer animating and expressing, observably visible in mirrors, in space and time, it's obviously a manifestation, but it's only impermanently so. It's only temporarily temporary in space and time. And it's reflecting an image, a manifestation that's observably visible in mirrors. Eventually, that manifestation will no longer be observable in mirrors. Will no longer be expressing, will no longer be speaking some language. It will no longer be enunciating some type of language and expressing in various ways. Expressing via language, expressing via emotions of some type. And there's all types of emotions, of course. And it's in these expressions that the manifestation is appearing in space and time. But what are we? We're not whom's. We're not who. It is recognized, yes, especially when there is no longer a self-conjured self entertained there, a separate sense of self. Entertained where? Everywhere. Because it thought it was entertaining someplace, in some fixed position in space and time. It thought that it was always, if it was ever seated in a chair, it always thought, well, I'm sitting in my chair. I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here because this is here. Here in my house, in my home. See, my this and my that. Fixed positions, duality. Obviously, yeah. You are there, and I am here. I am here, you are there. No. We are and we are not. Simply because everything is and it isn't. There it is. That's it. You can't go any further beyond that, and you can't say less than that. It's a summary that sounds as though it is as general as the English language can be used to express that scenario, this setup. Absolutely everything. But it's not a still or static setup. It appears as though it is in the stillness. Whenever the meditative practice is taken into account, whenever all thoughts are dropped, and that is possible through meditative practices, to drop every single thought, including the personal presence. There is both. We are and we are not. Absolutely everything is and it isn't. And then there's this idea of personal presence and impersonal presence. But we're both. We are personal presence and we are not impersonal presence. It's both. In space and time, and not of space and time. See, it's both simultaneously. How is that so? Nobody knows. Why? Because there's nobody around to say that. It apparently appears as though they're separate human corporeal manifestations, but that's never been the case. It was simply conjured. It was just thought that way. It was in the thinking. Just as Paul Hederman says, it's a presupposition. The mental thought system was always causing this idea that to think about something, okay, that's you. But there was a delay. So you had to think about it. So, okay, I made a decision. No. The decision was made for you. How? Well, the body-mind was simply just animated with energy, and since it's mingling with absolutely everything that it's appearing, then it's an automatic response. Well, how is it functioning now then? If it's no longer a separate sense of self that entertains thoughts and ideas, what is it operating on now? It's operating on the will, the accord and volition of what? Of absolutely everything that arises and appears as it does. Automatic responses, body-mind apparently appears to continue going on as though the non-local quality conscious energy field is the puppet master, and the puppet is this human corporeal manifestation that's temporary in space and time. That's the puppet. And so it gets hungry, it feels like it needs to eat something, so it goes over to the fridge, makes a sandwich. Yeah? Thirsty, it's a glass of water. It feels like it needs to have a latte or a coffee, so it goes to the coffee maker, gets it prepared, has morning coffee, and then gets along with its day as a habit, as a creature of habit. So that continues to apparently appear to go on, but now it's not for that body. It is simply just apparently appear to just get by, right? It's getting by, and the heart is still pumping the blood for the body mind to continue to do what? To be appearing as an animated, human corporeal manifestation. And it's breathing air. It does that automatically without even thinking about it. See, it's the thinking about something. Thinking about an idea, a thought form, a thought pattern, entertaining that. That's what reinforces a separate sense of self. I'm here, I'm sitting in the chair. I need to plan my day. So why do I need to plan my day? Have I ever asked myself that? No, not necessarily. It just seems as though it's the right thing to do. To plan. Plan for what? Well, the unexpected. I mean, what if somebody comes to the door? What if somebody calls? What if this? What if that? See, it's all these anticipations of what's going to happen next. And it is that anticipation of what's going to happen next that does what? It causes all these concerns and worries, and then it sets in as though, oh man, I'm so wound up today. I'm so depressed. I'm so anxious. Oh, why am I anxious? Oh, I'm anxious because I'm not sure what's going to happen next here. So, what does that do? What does that body-mind do if it believes that it is in a certain situation of, let's say, uncertainty to that degree where it is under a threat of some type? Okay? And there are some body-minds that actually are convinced that there are daily threats. The government's after them. Their phones are tapped. There's cameras set up, and there's that paranoia. Oh no. You go to the United States, and there's a lot of people like that. It's kind of, well, it's not wrong or right, but it's kind of sad situation when it is witnessed and you see these other body minds, these other people, these other human beings. Well, we can say that there are others, obviously. It apparently appears to be the case. But in the United States, there's a lot of paranoia. Why? Because there are so many that are so steeped into this idea of a separate sense of self. It has caused chaos, utter chaos, especially, of course, in the more densely populated top 10 cities of the United States. Of course, New York being top city of a very, you know, high number of body minds, all apparently appearing to go about their day. I mean, look at all the hustle and bustle, and for what? Well, we got to keep the society going somehow, so there's the economic viability. You got to get a job. Well, how do I get a job? I need to learn some kind of skill, don't I? So, see, there it goes. There it goes again. But it works. It has been working, doesn't it? Well, apparently appears to be the case. But notice something really peculiar, though. I mean, it's always been peculiar. You and I could be sitting in a room, and you may be simply watching this either on a phone or on your mobile phone just for a little while. You just happen to have gone this far. Maybe out of just sheer curiosity. And usually that's how it happens. How else is the separate sense of self going to collapse? How else is that going to occur? Does there have to be some kind of a setup, a certain scenario, a certain situation that is going on for that collapse of that separate sense of self to no longer be entertained? In other words, no longer be supporting the idea. That's all it is. It's just a thought. It's just an idea that you are a separate person that really matters, and then everybody else matters as well, but they're going on about their day as well, and they're taking care of themselves. No, life is taking care of everybody, absolutely everybody. Why? Because absolutely everything, life itself in nature, is running through. It's running the show. Yeah. You know what the human race likes to think, that it likes to entertain that idea, we're control of the show. Especially the societal structure. We can't. And who do we have running the show in the United States? Donald Trump. Well, there's a president. There's always been a president, hasn't there? Sure. After hundreds of years, as societal structure was created, there's a leader. There's a president. There it is. And then here in the United Kingdom, we have the Queen. We have Parliament. We have the structure of the United Kingdom that way. Governing what? Well, yeah. What exactly are they governing anyway? Well, to continue to try and contain a degree of relativity, of peace to some degree. How do you do that? Well, you have, the police that are there to keep the peace. If there is some kind of tension going on and it escalates and it turns into a riot, a group of people, then they contain that, right? Don't they? So to that degree, in that sense of an intact society or societal structure, without going into politics to that degree, that's what apparently appears to have been going on all along. Meanwhile, there's another generation continuously showing up. There are more babies born. What apparently appears to be a baby born. Of course, the process that we understand about birth, and then about we understand to a certain degree about death, birth and death. Where do we learn that from? Well, we learn that either from various sources, from school, through the public school system, books, dictionaries, encyclopedias, there's literature. You can go to the library. If you want to learn about something, you can look up a book. Well, now with the internet, you just key in, go into a search engine, and then you have a question, you ask it, and there it is. And so, are we living in interesting times or what? I mean, it's just amazing, extraordinary how things have apparently appeared to appropriate, and it seems as though it's futuristic, but at the same time, the feeling of a human corporeal body mind manifestation can still ponder and still feel that that there's not full blown in a sense, but it's still there. It's retained. It's some kind of energetic movement that never seems to leave. It doesn't disperse. It gets tucked away because, of course, the demands that apparently appear to be as though they're demands of life. What are the demands? Work, get a job, get a skill, earn money, earn wages, so you can pay for shelter and food. Those are the main things. Main things, you must have shelter of some kind, and we all must have food. When I say we all, it is of course the human corporeal manifestation. Gets hungry, gets thirsty, grabs a drink. Well, these are luxuries, aren't they? They really are. To have somewhere to live, some shelter, a roof over your head, so to speak, that kind of thing. The basic necessities of what apparently appears to be existence. That's why it's so easy to say these things regarding something to talk about, conversations. I mean, we have the luxury, we have a home, and then we can go to a local, in our town, in our city, we can go to a local coffee shop and visit with our friends, call them up on the phone. And not every single human corporeal body mind is living that way. And then there's this feeling of concern, there's this feeling of compassion and welfare. I was like, wow, I not only appreciate that life is temporarily, at least it's tolerable, at least it's tolerable and not struggling like a lot of other, people are. I mean, you can't deny that. You can't just say, oh, well, it appears to be what's happening. No, that's, to be complacent like that, that doesn't appear to be something that should be going on. Yet it does. And, there's still a heart there. There's still a degree of compassion, caring, concern. Yeah, but you can't just say that, oh, well, there's nobody there. Oh, that homeless person's not really there. He's not really suffering, so don't worry about it. Of course. I'm not saying worry. I say compassion. And if we could all care about that and to help somebody out, I mean, shouldn't that be the responsibility of what? The governments, isn't it? Yeah. But then they say, oh, there's too many people around to try and help everybody. There's plenty to go around. See, it's the balance of wealth, isn't it? There's an imbalance. There's no balance there. And that's why societal structures, they teeter. They're not, the stability is not there. It's not stabilized. Because every single body mind should have plenty, should have a roof over their heads, should have food to eat, and there should be that utopian society. It should already be around, in fact. If we're going to look at this in a practical way, that if it is true, and it is obviously true, that there are land masses, and on those land masses there's various thousands, millions, billions of different types of people. And what's extraordinary, though, is when you entertain that idea and that thought that you can have in the Amazon jungles people that are surviving there for thousands of years, their particular tribes, they're still there, and then yet we have all these modern conveniences that are going on. Is there any difference there? Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, the shelter is more apparently appears to have a better integrity, rather than living in a solid building rather than living in a grass hut. Well, yeah, that's obvious. Not having to go and hunt for your food, you just simply go to the local Walmart or local store, the Asda or Tesco and Morrison's, Sainsbury's, the stores here in the United Kingdom. And then in the United States, of course, you have your Walmarts, and your H-E-B's in Texas. And so, you entertain these ideas, don't you, at first, if there's a separate sense of self there. But then you also begin to recognize something else that you used to wonder, especially this body mind, when it was first beginning to go to school. And in that innocence, I can recall the very first time I saw cruelty. It was recess. Recess was always a lot of fun when you're a child, and you don't want to be cooped up in the classroom very long, not too much longer. And then in the middle of the day, the recess bell, you go to lunch and go in the swing set, do whatever out at the playground. I think that's what they called it. When I grew up in South Texas and in Lower Rio Grande Valley of Harlingen, the elementary school there, Travis Elementary, there in Harlingen, I could recall what it was like. And I'm sure every other body mind has that recollection of how simple and innocent that retaining that innocence of not having to worry so much about what's going on around you. What you were always seemingly were trying to do was just play. Just enjoying the activity, the action of play and playful. And then other children are around and you're playing games and things like that. And there's a lot of joy involved in that. There was. You remember that joy and that freedom. Oh, that sense of freedom. And then getting on a bicycle and just riding the bicycle, just simply riding around, And that interaction with other people and that innocence. What happened to that? It's still there. You can still sense that degree of innocence. It's still there. Although 56 years later, this body mind can still recall those apparent years that it had retained innocence and it was really, in touch with nature in such a way, but at the same time in awe of it. Just looking around, wow. But then, something peculiar happened. I saw cruelty for the first time. There was this kid. I just saw him in the distance, and I was on the other side of the playground. The swing sets were over there. He was under a tree in the shade, having his lunch. And, hold on, let me get this call. I have to pause this. And so it was the 1970s, and it was in the 5th grade. I think I was about 6 or 7 years old, something like that. No, 9, 10? Well, anyway, I was 5 years of age in 1968. So, 69, 6, 77, 8. Oh, anyway, trying to recall exactly what year it was, but that doesn't really matter. Of course, this whole story doesn't really matter. It doesn't. But yet, this body mind can recall feeling so free and in that innocence, and then, so happy to, especially, to create friendships. Create friendships and the camaraderie. People, when you're a kid, when you're a child, you don't think about adult things. You don't know. Of course, how can you know? You're just starting school, or you're beginning, experiencing life and that kind of thing, and going through life, and then just witnessing cruelty for the first time. I didn't understand. I kind of did the thing with the cockey's side. The dog goes, and I don't understand. What the hell is that? I don't understand what that is. And that was the, witnessing and observing cruelty. The kid was just, he's around my age. He had his lunchbox, and he just was having his lunch. He wasn't bothering anybody. And along come two bullies, and they come around and they kick rocks and dirt into his lunchbox, and it kind of ruins his food that he was trying to enjoy and eat. And then they walk away laughing. I was trying to understand why did they do that? What's going on there? And so there is how the somehow some kind of energetic movement, some kind of energy caused this friction, or this kind of a I couldn't make sense of it. I was trying to understand what compelled those children to do that to the other child, and you would think that they had retained enough innocence to realize, that why would you harm somebody else? Why aren't you just enjoying and enjoying playing and going on the swing sets, the monkey bars, tetherball, playing games, running around and playing tag, and marbles, things like that, children's games. Why are you being cruel to other people? So there's kind of where innocence began to diminish, and I can't recall ever asking my parents, especially Mom. Of course, Dad was too busy earning a living, and that's the way it was. This was back in traditional families in America, where the father was a breadwinner. So you went earn the money to keep for the house, and then it wasn't until a little bit later on that started catching on with the women's equality and that kind of thing, where they could do jobs just as good as a man could and that kind of thing. But the way it was, the old-fashioned ways, was Mom was always preparing the meals. She was there to keep a home and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of women that are kind of feel funny about that. They say, well, why does it have to be like that? But anyway, was I trying to make a point here? No, in a sense, yeah. Whatever happened to that innocence? I mean, that's raw to me. And not to me, but I used to, in terms of a separate sense of self, that I thought I was. So I thought I was this kid, and that I better do what my parents say, and that idea of a controlling kind of family environment, not so much control, but keeping within boundaries of keeping the peace and doing what I was supposed to do, and thinking. And learning what I was supposed to do, and then these ways of being are taught. You learn ways of interacting with other people, and learn what's right and wrong, and what's good and bad, what's considered good and bad. And then there was religion that threw a major wrench into the whole thing. Then the idea that after you die, you're going to be judged for the life that you lived, and you're either going to go to one of two places. Either if you made an effort to live a good life, and you'll go to a heavenly realm, and if you lived a bad life, like those kids that were, kicking dirt and rocks into the other kid's his lunchbox. He was just trying to enjoy food there. And it's probably a sandwich that his mom probably lovingly prepared for him. So, something happens though, or something goes on in the societal structure. It doesn't seem to be, uh, it doesn't seem to be a very safe all the way around, setup. Societal structure doesn't seem to be a setup that. I'm not saying it should be perfect or should be ideal, yet there should be enough to go around. In other words, there shouldn't be this imbalance where you have people that have plenty, food and shelter, and even more of that. They can have all these other luxuries, and yet you can see homeless people that are struggling, and they don't have a home, they don't have shelter, they don't have a job anymore, and they somehow lost track, or they could never get on track to become economically viable, or for some reason they couldn't get that education so they could be integrated and they could find a place to live, and then something happens to the family unit. So that's how every generation tries to, every generation behind the next, and so on and so forth. They try to learn how to interact in this kind of environment, this kind of setup here. And it appears to be a little bit different depending on what part of the earth that when I say you find yourself in a sense, every body mind does. The self finds itself in a certain environment. Well, what about that? Why is that not being addressed? It's just apparent. It appears to be what's happening. That's not good enough. No, of course not. No, that can't be it. But if we're going to get into this discussion regarding, the experience of a human being, not just, this idea of a separate self, it only apparently appears to be that way. And then you get involved in the societal structure, and then it's these rules and guidelines and certain, laws that govern the way the structure of the society is set up and that kind of thing. And there's these laws and human rights and things like that are exercised. And that's supposed to be something beneficial for the person that is, let's say, an individual, an important part of the economy, so to speak. And yet, what about the family unit? I mean, that appears to be something that's quite critical there, important. The family unit, it could just simply be one child with their parent, and is it a loving, kind of communicable and nice environment? So what happens if there's abuse that happens there, and there's turmoil, and the father is struggling, to hold a job, and maybe he drinks a little bit too much, and that kind of thing, and so that sets in. So, is that the fault? Is that the fault of the father that, say, maybe in a sense, kind of, there's that expression, lost his way somehow, and he leaves, and then the child and the mother are left behind, and there's these laws. He's going to have to pay child support to be responsible for leaving like that. He shouldn't have left. And so there's that family structure thing, and then I can recall seeing a movie called K-Pax, where this K-Paxian said, well, where I'm from, the planet I'm from, everybody takes care of each other. There are no parents. There is no type of societal structure. Everybody already automatically knows. And then I began to entertain the idea of thinking, well, what happened to this planet where we don't see that should be going on with K-Paxians, where there's already a natural agreement, and in the innocence you already know right from wrong. It's already an inert, natural thing to harmonize, to be in harmony with all the other life. And that seems to be the default position. of the default position throughout the universe, whereby, especially the human corporeal body minds, that they seem to already automatically have retained that unconditional loving force that's throughout the universe, and that's the beloved that, when we refer to non-duality circles, of course, Tony Parsons is the first name that comes up, because it's almost kind of like the forefather, so to speak, of non-duality, of Neo-Advaita, if you will. When we say Neo-Advaita, of course, that's taking the original Upanishads and the Gita of the Advaita Vedanta of the ancient, during the ancient of days, when it first started the Sanskrit original tongues, and then translating immediately from that particular language, and then applying it to English directly, a direct translation, and then sharing that information, and then there's this recognition that all is non-dual in nature. All that is and all that is not empty fullness, spacious aliveness, simply this. That's what the message of non-duality is about. It's a recognition whilst there's this apparent appearance of this human corporeal manifestation that's similar with all other body-mind units of local quiet conscious energy forms that are temporarily, impermanently appearances, mingling with absolutely everything else that's appearing. But not necessarily the foreground and not the background, but mingling with it. It no longer apparently appears to be the case, because it never was that way, whereby there was a separate person, a separate sense of self that felt alone and felt disconnected from absolutely everything else. Well, once it is recognized that it never was disconnected, it's always been, connected and mingling and blended with absolutely everything as an appearance. And yet, in space and time, though, and not of space and time. Some kind of energetic movement, as though there's some kind of a crossover, so to speak. As though, what is that? What is that barrier or the veil? That word's been used before. Heard that expression regarding cognizance and consciousness. There's this veil that a human corporeal manifestation could remember past lives, all the past lives that it had ever lived, if reincarnations to be taken as a true process, as something, as a cycling of souls, or a cycling of energetic movements of human corporeal manifestations in space and time, but in different points of space and time in the large, stretched out continuum. The story of Earth. We can't measure how much time has already passed, seemingly so, with past civilizations that have been on this planet, the story of Earth. Archaeologists keep digging further and further into the ground, and are coming up with evidence of pottery and different types of structures and buildings. And there's recently off of the Bimini Islands, there was Atlantis and underwater and that kind of thing. And so you begin to, a thought is entertained that way, that, well, if it appeared to have happened so many thousands and millions, even millions of years ago, if that's the case, and then there were dinosaurs that roamed the earth, and, well, where is the where is this mention of the Upanishads? How did that come into play all of a sudden? For to entertain the idea of the Darwinian theory about the as though the human corporeal body minds were originally cavemen or apes. So how does this message of non-duality, Advaita Vedanta, fit into that? Has that ever been brought up? Don't know. Not sure if what would be said by a non-duality speaker if that was ever brought up. That would be interesting. An interesting subject to entertain, wouldn't it? What is this? Is this volume 4? Yeah, I think it is. Well, this body mind has had a week off. When I say a week off, kind of a vacation period of the holidays, days off from the job. And so, well, yeah, this body mind has to go to work. If this body mind doesn't go to a job, then it can't pay the bills, and it can't pay the internet bill, and it can't pay the light bill and the electricity bill, and it can't pay the rent. So it lives in shelter, and then to go to a nearby store, or and keep the car going as well, the transportation, and keep all of that maintained. That's why it's so critical that a job is maintained. So there shouldn't be any complaints. No, don't complain. Say, I hate having to go to work. I drag myself to go. And hey, be grateful. Okay, just realize that. Realize that there's a lot of other body minds out there in the apparent appearance of the world around you, and you just go downtown to the city, or the town or the city where you live, and you can see obviously there are people among us. Okay, those are not unreal. Those apparent appearances of human corporeal body mind manifestations, those are just as real as this body mind apparently appears to have been. Just as real. But then, of course, there's the unreal part. But that's not what we're referring to here. I mean, this message about non-duality is simply the fact that absolutely everything is non-dual in nature. There are no two of anything. Everything is interconnected. Everything is mingling with everything else. It's absolutely perfect, whole, complete. And that's what this message has been all about. So let's get back into that, shall we? Yeah. Alrighty then.
Go ahead. There's a planning about what they do. There's not the doing of the planning. They think they're planning. Right. Things could go, and what happens when there's always an exception to the rule, and there's always an exception to the rule? Your whole fucking thesis is blown out of the water.
And who did the planning? Who planned the planning? Did you plan to do the planning?
That's right. What initiated the idea? It just ding. What initiated? Do you see it coming? No. You're at the end point of a process of dreaming, yeah? Dreaming dreamt, yeah? And then the dreamt just has a narration of trying to explain all the dreaming. Of course, to try to make sense for it. You're attempting to make that which is insane feel safe here, yeah? Just let it fucking be surprised all day. This is the whole point. This is the whole point of choice. Why not just get rebooted? Yeah. So let's just entertain the idea that the movement of the mental state right now is to claim what it comes in contact with. Now, it's not producing the contact. Consciousnesses, yes? There is an awareness that is aware of things happening. And then after that is produced, the mental state feels like it's gotten in contact. So it claims what it comes in contact with. If it's a thought, a feeling, an action, yes. If it's the idea of time. And then suddenly it uses all these things in a way sort of like a mirror, yeah, to see itself, really. Because it can't see itself, it's not there. It can't look and see itself. It's manufactured, yeah? So it gets a reflection by the claiming. So the thinking, the idea of being the thinker is arrived by the claiming of the thinking. There is no thinker and then thinking. There's thinking that implies a thinker. All right? Just get this, just see it, you know, so that you don't think it's this way. Thinking, the claiming of thoughts implies the thinker of them. Yes? There is not one thought that comes after. See, the thinker is a thought, basically. Yeah? So there's a claiming of the thoughts to imply another thought, which is I'm the thinker. Yeah? Same thing, feelings. Feelings are happening, you know? You get stuck with a pin or something like that. There's sensations are happening all the time. Most are under the surface probably, a number of it is above the surface. And so again, the mental state gets introduced in all this and says, hey, yeah, that feeling implies me. Yeah? I'm the generator or the haver of that feeling. I'm the one, either I'm causing it or some other one is causing it in me, but somehow I'm intrinsically linked to the feeling. Something that just comes and goes all day, yeah, is implying there's someone that's there when it comes and is there when it goes. Yeah, it uses time after the claiming to give length to itself. So it can say, oh, I was there before, I'm the feeler, so I was there before the feeling happened. The feeling came up, I felt it, and then it left, and so, but I was always there. I was there before the feeling arose, because I'm the feeler. So whatever feeling arises, I've been there to sort, whatever ball's thrown, I'm the mitt that catches it, yeah? And then when there's not a ball thrown, the mitt's there anyway. It's just waiting for the next feeling, this and that, yes? So there's an implying, it's just a magic trick. You know, it's the only way this would be happening is belief in the assumptions. It's sort of like the fractal images that appear like a tree, yeah, it has to be agreed upon in a sense. There's got to be an agreement in it. So there's feeling, thoughts, actions. Yes? And all of them, of course, cast in time. Those are claimed. You weren't claiming them when seemingly you were here as a 2-year-old. So the claiming came later. You were not claiming feelings as your feelings when you were 1 or 2. You fucking weren't. There was no sense of self that had formulated yet. The my hadn't occurred yet. All this is a process. We even have an example of its absence in what we call our own life. When you were a baby, you didn't know you were Joyce, or you were going to be Joyce later, or you were Joyce before. You were just fucking on. And
See? Birth name and birthright. There it is. Out of all the non-duality satsangs and all the non-duality speakers, with the Neo-Advaita movement that's been going on, and it's called Neo-Advaita because that's the comparison. Neo-Advaita taking the ancient teachings of the Upanishads in the Sanskrit writings of the Gita and the Upanishads, and then a direct translation into English, and here is termed, you have Neo-Advaita. And so, as he's referring to a birth name and birthright, see, there it is. That's how it began to become developed, this separate sense of self. Prior to that, there was the innocence of a child. Simply raw beingness. That's it. And a direct hit and mingling in that innocence with absolutely everything. It just simply was so engrossed in just the simplicity of beingness. And that is right, that's right there. That is what is longed for. That is what every single body-mind is longing for, the retaining of that innocence. It wants to recover that, and it does. It does recover it by how? By dropping all of the presuppositions, by dropping the mental thought system, by dropping all the dualities, the conditions, the conditional rules of beingness. There are no rules to simply be a natural being. Not even personal presence. It is both personal and impersonal presence. That's how we are meshed and coalescing and a mixture with absolutely everything that appears as it does. So therefore it is an appearance, energetic movement, human corporeal, manifestation of energy. Directly from what? From the void, from no thing, out of nowhere. Temporally, manifestation. Therefore, what apparently appears to be a reality base, a reality frame, the story of Earth, the template of this dream, apparently appears to be some type of a realm. And in this realm, it is produced, it apparently appears to be a production of a setup of a realm via the appearance of absolutely everything. It's the stage. It's all set up. It's already there. It's always been there. Where? Everywhere. The everywhereness of everywhere. If that makes sense. No fixed position. No fixed position in space and time. It's not going to make sense to what? The separate sense of self. The separate individual that believes it is a separate self with its own birth name, its own birthright, its own life to live, free will and choice to do so. And it goes on and on and on like that, that sense of a separate self, which is needless suffering. And in the Buddhic traditions, it refers to that. It's all that needless suffering, self-inflictions, self-afflicted inflictions. They're all self-conjured. All those self-conjurings are unnecessary. They don't have to be there. They're all fictitious. They're made up via the mental thought system. Entertaining those ideas and thoughts. Drop them all. Drop them all. You don't even need the consciousness to be. Don't need that. The consciousness is simply there to do what? To interact with other human corporeal manifestations. And interact how? In peace. And in bliss. And just the simplicity of beingness. And that kind of interaction, communing, the energies of human corporealness, whilst they are appearing in space and time, just simply the simplicity of beingness. Doesn't have to be enjoyment there, but that goes along with it. That's a kind of a bonus because you're kind of enjoying the togetherness, the oneness, the absolute non-dual nature of all, of absolutely everything. That's it right there. It's been referred to as the beloved. It's been referred to as simply this. It's been referred to spacious aliveness. So all those types of idealisms, if you want to call them idealisms, but it's beingness. It has nothing to do with idealisms, concepts, thoughts. Drop all the consciousness, drop all of those ideas, and just simply be. Just let it be. And it's that easy. It's that simple. It's very, very easy to be. Extremely. It's automatic. That's the default position. Beingness. To be. That's the default position. It really, truly is.
Now everyone around you seemingly Joyce, fucking pounding it in so that Joyce would just start assuming, oh, I am Joyce, yeah, and that's mine, and then all this. Yes, you can see. I mean, it's not like you got to go through 800 years of spiritual archaeology. Just look at yourself, this long-lasting, independent, separate unit, as when it was a young, long-lasting, independent, separate unit. It had no sense of self. So how did it occur? Did it get struck with it? No. The brain developed to a point where it could start doing its maneuvers.
Entertain thoughts, right. The mental thought system, entertain ideas.
That's happening.
Yeah.
And organize it under this one principle that it's me. It has something to do with me. Either I'm fucking doing it or it's being done to. I'm being done to. Yes, just a vague idea. Don't even believe that. It's just a way of explaining it.
No.
But I do know its movement is claiming. The mental state's primary movement is claiming because it doesn't have a life. It has to claim the activities that we call living to imply the one who's living. It cannot get there, yeah? Which the I am is there. The I am doesn't arrive at I am. It wasn't I was, I will be, therefore I am. No, the mental state does that. The mental state, every memory you freaking have is you as a body or others as bodies. Yes? Every worry that you have in the future is you as a body. Every worry that your head is entertaining about the future is as you as a body.
And then the mental state does what? It has you that way. The mental state uses the human corporeal manifestation of a body mind that had just been fine prior to the development of the mind, of the body mind. So then, belief set in. They didn't have to believe in anything to simply be, to simply exist, to simply be the personal presence, but not an individual personal presence. Both a personal and impersonal presence. The impersonal presence is what we are, which is non-local quality consciousness energy. Manifesting in space and time, but not of space and time. Yeah? For an impermanently temporary, indeterminate duration in space and time. And so, whilst this apparent appears to be going on, the simplicity of the going-onness, is to be. Don't have to know about it. Don't have to do anything about it. Just simply be. Going with the flow, with whatever arises. You apparently appear to take action, sure. You get up off a chair, you walk to the next room. You apparently appear to be taking action of some kind. That is mistaken as though that's action, but that's still being. It's still being if it doesn't have to be thought about. To be doesn't have to be thought about. This is the foundation of the non-dual nature, of non-separation. Nobody has to think themselves into being, because they don't have a self that needs to know anything or do anything about being. Therefore, it apparently appears to be that there's this body, but it's not your own. It's borrowed in a sense. In a sense, these body minds are borrowed. Borrowed from what? From all that is. Absolutely everything. That's the main energy. That is the primary energy, if you will. This is how these spiritual traditions were developed and how these religions came about. The divine order, the supreme deity, supreme being. See, they had to give it a name, and they had to label it. Krishna, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad. See, all the different religions have a name. That's not necessary. It doesn't have to have a name because it's not an individual force. It is the universal force of absolutely everything that arises and appears of its own accord and volition. And you've always been. Absolutely every single human corporeal manifestation is constantly and consistently mingling with that as an appearance. But the appearance was mistaken as what? Permanent, mortal, solid, a physical solid body that was born, a beginning, and will die in the end, and that's it. It will never ever exist again. No, that's not it. That's the story that's made up. That is a fictitious story that's not truly happening. That never happens. It's only thought to happen. See, there's the consciousness, the mental thought system that entertains the idea that you are a separate person that matters. And that you have a birth name and birthright. Just take a look at your birth certificate. Dig it up. There's your name right there. You are a special person with that name. And then you have your own life to live, your own free will and choice to live your life however you want to experience that life. Nope. Have news for that. Have news for that body mind. No. Not happening. It's not happening. Never was happening. So that's the message of Advaita Vedanta, of non-duality, that everything has always been this way. Absolutely everything as it appears has always arisen this way. It's just when you start thinking about it, that's what screws it all up. Okay, it does. It messes it up. It kind of gets you off track, so to speak. Off of what track? There is no track. There is no track you have to follow to be. Yeah?
If it's you as a spirit, it's framed as a body. When you're thinking I'm spirit, you think in the context of body. That's the system. The system is called self-centeredness. You're not thinking. The thought system pictures you as a body. So when you thought about as I'm the spirit, you're still framed. This idea of spirit is still framed by the system. Yeah? The system doesn't leave the system. You're not thinking yourself into fucking spirit, and you're not thinking yourself out of spirit. You just believe that's true. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. All right, so claiming. Now the claiming that is used to arrive at the idea of the one is very, very fast. It does its production in like maybe, I don't know, less than 2 seconds, less than a half a second, I don't know. But I do know that as soon as you get ready to undo it, you're doing it. That I know. You cannot outdraw it because it will be claiming to be the drawer of it. Yeah? You're not gonna fucking, you're not. I've seen it. It's very, very fast to a point where you don't even know it's being established now. You just assume that's the starting point. You do. Yeah, it's so easy. Everyone seems to sort of start there. Yeah, everyone talks about stuff, and then maybe they have a sense of self-reflection, and then they talk about,
I did today.
I've been thinking about me, but they don't realize there's still the me has moved to the next point of being the observer, of recognizing, oh, I'm not that, but I'm not that, but I'm also not that. Yes, it doesn't go there. Yeah, so a lot of people are in the second ring, so they're first on the consequential level. What the fuck's going on? And suddenly some self-awareness comes in. They start seeing, oh, I can't fucking drink. If I do, I'm fucked. And this and that. Wow. Yeah. But still, the selfing, the claiming of being the one who has arrived at that realization is still in place. It is so fast, and there's no topic that it's immune from. It can go anywhere. Whatever it comes in contact with, it will kind
it's not invulnerable to absolutely anything.
Living
that can
in
be
ashrams, living in, it just doesn't, nothing. It's so quick that I humbly believe there's no process in time that's going to get before that process. Just don't think so. So I just don't see how you're going to do yourself out of the doer or think yourself out of the thinker. Just don't. Or meditate yourself out of meditate. Just don't see it. Honestly. So when this became clear to me, and it's clear to me, and it's always right now, it's clear to me. It's always the constant present state of being convinced is right now. Yeah, I don't care if I was clear last year or next year. It doesn't matter. It's now. And what's happened is it's dumbed me down quite a lot because I have no interest in going off on mental mind candy escapades. Because the fact is, the ordinariness is the beautiful, always available all the time. Yeah. That to me is it. Yeah. So I've lost interest in shit I was quite interested in. Quite interested in going off and this and that and this. It doesn't make any sense to me anymore. Because if you don't see this, you're going to be looking from its effects. And I'm saying most of us start right there. We are already the completed product of the selfing. So when you get introduced to the idea of selfing, there's a feeling that you're doing it or that it's doing you. And that's the bondage of self. That's it.
Yep.
There's still a claiming. Now the selfing gets claimed, and then you get, instead of seeing the selfing implies a self, you take this, you to be the self that's doing the selfing. I see the example every time. It's many satsangs. It's a pure, perfect illustration. That would be a book you could just have. The selfing, the yapping going on, yes? The memories, the interpreting of perceptions, the thoughts, yes?
Witnessing evil,
The
witnessing that kid in
selfing
the playground.
implies
All of
a
that.
someone. Usually when people get introduced to the idea of selfing, they think they're the one that's hearing about it. Yes, you see it?
Well,
It's that fast. You hear about what you're not as what you're not, which doesn't go anywhere. What you're not loves non-duality as a philosophy. It does. Right?
Oh.
It can excuse itself from a lot of shit.
oh yeah. Nobody there to do the dishes. I like that one. That's a good one.
So seeing that the claiming may be right in place right now, and so maybe instead of trying to work on that, which you can work on, but to a certain point, there's certain source codes that aren't going to be fidgeted with by the system itself. It's just not going to happen. So
No.
you have to see the pitfalls of just being introduced to a simple idea of not to.
Yeah.
There's a number of
Not
pitfalls that are commonplace.
Yeah.
There's the sense of being the one who heard the message.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you think you got the message.
And now you think you
which
need to be a
means sets
guru.
you up for
Now
the
you
experience
think you
of
need to move
losing.
to India or go spend 7 years in a cave.
You know what I mean? Or the awakeness is something that has to happen, but in fact, as an experience, but as a non-experience, it's always happening. Now, there may be an experience where it seems to like a thunderbolt happen, but in fact, in the experiential level, it's always happening at all times, right where you are. What do you want? You want to play with the idea, that thing was so powerful, the head's going to love the fucking claimant.
Yeah.
I mean, it is juicy beyond compare. You go right to the head of the class in the spiritual school. But again, there can be a little bonding of that, and so suddenly you may get to be the most exquisite butt of the most exquisite spiritual joke, which is you lose the awakening. Oh, and usually there's got to be a story to say why you lost it, which you started basically. You fucked up. I didn't do something. It was taken away. Again, it's all about you. Always. Or even the non-you is all about you. That's the craziness of it, really. So, all right, so there's the claiming, and then you watch. That's why we share here. There's this lady that's helping me write, not helping me, she wrote the stuff. She sent me a thing on by Nisargadatta, and as Nisargadatta's talking about it once, he says, you know, I'm not talking to your head, I'm talking to consciousness. So basically, yeah, we're throwing the message, not to you. I don't care about Joyce getting it, yeah. I want, if what you are hears it, it's going to look at what the activity that's constantly implying what you're not, and it's going to have a little healthy suspicion around it. And it's going to go, hey, maybe this thing has run its race, you know, or at least let's slow down this, like there's another wheel in the comic. Maybe, you know, and what happens is there's a loss of interest, not in the dreaming, but in the dreamt, yes? Yeah. There's not a loss of interest in what you are, there's a loss of interest in what you're not, basically. Yeah, it's like when some people were talking today at this meeting. In recovery, they talk about a spiritual malady, which I don't believe there's any spiritual malady. How could the spirit have a malady? What does it have, like, you know, hemorrhoids, type of, there's no body to have anything, yes? So there's no spiritual malady.
No.
There's a mental malady.
Mental,
And what
definitely.
is the mental malady?
Yeah.
Is an overabundance of attention and interest.
Yeah, to convince
Really.
you that you are a separate soul.
And the pitfalls is when you realize that and you get interested in moving that interest, that's more interest in the system.
Yeah.
You can't, it doesn't work. You can't, self
not.
can't get out of self. So
Indeed.
your noble endeavor gets convoluted because the system knows how to bend any of your little spiritual arrows. It knows how to bend it back to you again, always back to you. Yes?
Boomerang.
You see it? So you can't say, all right, I'm going to go on a course of losing interest in self. That would be interest in self. Yes, it's just the same thing. Got it. Quit playing God. That which is playing God here is quit playing God. If it tries to quit playing God, that's playing God. It goes on forever. It can't. There's not one moment
Reaction
where
to
that which is
reaction to
playing
reaction.
God can quit playing God,
Right.
because that would be the playing of God. Yes. So you see. These things are meant to hit you to a point where there's a disarming, not a freaking call to arms, but a disarming. Because there are a lot of engines running in you. Some are idling, some are like, just ready to go. But we're in like almost like a time wave of momentum of seeking. Yes? And the seeking, if it's about something really, really important or deemed to be important, that seeking has an incredible ability to reflect the seeker quite largely, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Now the seeking is going to continue, but if there was a choice to write, first I'd have all the fun when I was young, but if there was a choice to write the script, I would get into a very mundane, simple life that you couldn't make much out of all the claiming. You know, the head just couldn't cook up a big story like going to the thrift store or getting a cup of coffee. There's not much, fuck, anyone can do that shit. It's not a big deal. But there's nice thing about it, it's gargantuan look is diminished. It's got a very small playing field, like a little life in it. And after a while, it's just, the interest can't provoke the interest to come into its little storyline. Now, when I was into spirituality, it was extremely important. I mean, fuck. I mean, I'd have a girlfriend wanting
Thought it
to
was
have
into
lovely
something
sex with
special.
me. I can't now. I'm practicing. Practicing.
I need a meditate.
It was like insane. The situation right there was, hey, opened up. No.
Wow, I couldn't
Moving
enjoy the
towards
moment
my
there, huh?
goal. Yeah, but I was going to be there. The goal isn't for you to arrive. It's the realization you are arrived. Yes. On having never left is the key. Not on finally arriving. No, on having never left. Yes. Because you can't make...
See that?
You can't have hierarchies on having never left. All right. Who's been here longest and on having never left? Well, everyone. Who got here first? Everyone. Who's left on having never left? What? You know what I mean? All those little things can't catch. They don't gain traction. So the interest, to me, the spiritual malady is just, it's really an inordinate amount of interest and attention to the mental fabrications, yes, of time, of
The conjurings,
yes.
right.
And therefore, it's sort of like, is it the sun's fault you stay inside all day? No, the sun's there. It's not withholding its sunness from you. If you would go out, you'd get hit with the sun. There'd be sun. Yeah. So the sun isn't having a malady. It's we're up the fucking ass of the sun, living in a mental structure.
Yeah.
Totally mental. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so there's spirit, always available at all times, but in this little dream, and this is the beauty of it, it's only in the dreaming that you cannot pay attention to spirit.
It gets in the way. Ah.
It's only here that impossibilities seem possible. It's only in dreaming.
The natural simplicity of
time. Hey, how are you? It's only in these. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Caught me in mid exhilarating moment. Have you heard anything about us?
Yes,
Zen Bitch Lab? Oh, YouTube?
yeah.
Oh, YouTube. All right, good. All right, so,
Sorry, I'm late, I got lost.
oh yeah, it's great, and it's bad. There's having a big thing at the temple across the way, so there's no parking.
Okay.
So don't worry. All right, but we're gonna stop here and we'll start with you a little bit. All right? There is no you, but that's.
Oh, don't do that to her.
But we'll just go to the basics because
You can't hit him that
it
hard.
doesn't
Man.
matter really.
You can Zen bitch slap her,
What
but
we were just
man, be
talking about
gentle.
now is the first movement of the head. Yes, we're in a dreaming. We're dreaming. Yes, it's beautiful. The Course of Miracles to me does a beautiful job of that because a lot of people say I'm in a dream, but actually the Course brings you to the point that you are actually the dreaming. Yeah. You see, the objective identification, from there you see yourself as in a dream. Yeah, because again, the body reigns supreme. You can't think outside of that. So I'm not dreaming. I was dreaming at night, last night, but I'm not dreaming. Yes, you see, the body framing is unbelievable. Yeah. So, but the Course would attempt to go over the dream's head and say, talk to the dreaming, which is appearing as the dream. Hey, you and I as the dreaming are the dreaming.
Non-local quality conscious
not you and I
energy.
as the dream.
Is that consciousness?
You and I as what we are. Yeah. You and I are the dreaming. Yes.
And
Incredibly
space
different.
and
Yeah.
timing that.
What happens if you get a sense of you're the dreaming? Well,
All in good time.
Jesus Christ, find out. See
Everything
how
all the
many
time.
knots are connected to that one knot. Yeah? The idea of the dreamt being real spins out a lot of other ideas and assumptions. If you get to, like we used to share, all right, here's the first knot. So the first knot is the identification as a body, let's say. And then there's all these other knots. Separation, I may not get what I want, I can have suffering and pain, tons of knots based on the first knot. So let's say you go to a seminar and try to get relief with relationships, all right? So you work really hard for a year, read all the books, and your relationships loosen up, but then something happens, they tie up again. But if you would go to the first knot, and if you got relief there, that relief would trigger all the other knots, yes? Because a thread of this identification is in all the other assumptions, yes? All of them. So you would know the problem by relief. When you get relief, you know you're onto something. So the relief from the bondage of self
get a
is
direct
a
hit of
recognition
what you are.
you're not that which can be bound.
Non-local quality conscious
You are
energy.
not the identification as
Very
a
free
body.
energy.
It doesn't say what you are. You'll find out about that. But this whole direction is to see what you're not. Yeah? And it's not like this stuff, it's not a denial like people do. When they don't want to feel something or they're trying to avoid something, they deny it. They don't, but the mental state does. Negation is not denial.
No.
Denial doesn't work. Negation is seeing something. Not from the dream, but from the dreaming. Yes, or from what we are. There, it's very, very sudden, but its lastability is profound.
It's immediate,
The
yeah.
information, yeah. It triggers like 100 monkey syndrome, and it's not easy to get undone. Yes, you've
Oh,
seen, there was a seeing of something, and it's like that's
It gets
that.
locked in.
Yes.
You're locked in
All right.
for the rest
So
of this
the
manifestation.
claiming is what the mental state is about.
The rest of the
So
duration,
the mental state, I like to say it has,
locked in.
I don't do any studying, but let's say there's memories, there's interpretation of perceptions, and then there's a thought system, yeah? So the thought system and the memories and the perceptions obviously are body related, yes? You think of yourself as a body, you're remembered as a body, and you're perceived as bodies, yes? So the mental state is constantly in the act of being identified as a body. When it dwells in the past, it's being identified as a body in the past. When it's worrying about you in the future, it's worrying about you as a body in the future. Yeah, it's not you worrying, it's the mental state's worrying. None of these activities are yours. Yeah? None of these activities are yours. There's not an ownership here. There's a seeing of it. Yeah? So see it. The claiming is a basic 101 understanding. Watch it. Yeah? And how can you recognize the claiming? Well, look at the word my in your day. Yeah? See how much my is just assumed. Yeah? You think it's your time. You think it's this, your little space, that's my jacket, give me my fucking dessert, whatever. There's a lot of mine going on. Yeah? That my is representing the claiming of what's going on. So the weird thing is, as the Course in Miracles says, beautiful diagnostic. It says, you and I are the dreaming of the dreaming. I don't like the word dream, they use dream. But dreams is a thing, eh? Dream. I don't believe there's a thing. I believe there's just verbing. So, you and I.
Yeah. Now, another way of saying that, and you don't even have to believe that a certain term is being used, and the meaning behind certain terms, certain words in the English language, what it's referring to is that the dream would be suspending the activity of dreaming, which is being. Being and dreaming, two different words, same type of presence is happening there. It's not really a happening, but it's an energetic movement, you know? And it cannot be detected, though. It can only be noticed by exposing it from what it's not. In other words, what you're not is this body-mind manifestation. You're not that, you're just expressing. Okay, so there's this expression of a body-mind manifestation. It's temporally temporary, and it won't always be that way. That's how it's impermanent. That's how it's part of impermanence. But it's also part of absolutely everything. And yet, it is as though it's appearing that way. It's just appearances. Temporally temporary. And not for any intention, not for any meaning, reason, and purpose. Now, other than of its own accord and volition. That force, whatever you'll call it, the prime directive, the supreme deity, the force, like in Star Wars, similar to that, likened to that, the force. These are just words. They're simply just words. But it's not even the idea of that. It's just the recognition. And not even using, but just borrowing, of course, and using the cognition. Cognition is to think about something. But you don't have to take the thought and just say, well, that's my thought. I thought about that. Now I know. No. It's not about knowing. It's not about doing. It's not about seeking a certain book, finding the answers there, and then, okay, now I know. No. It's not about knowing. No. Now you're being. And guess what? You've always been being. See? That's it. This is the message of Advaita. The message of Advaita Vedanta. And Vedanta, of course, is the letter of the law. Advaita is the spirit of the law, so to speak. The personal presence, that's the Vedanta. That's the writing down, the scribing, the studies, the reading, the mantras, the stances, the meditative practices. That is the Vedanta bit. The Advaita bit is the being, is the beingness. Now, that's what was being shared. The fact that non-separation is simply not two. That's not non-duality. That's it. Right there. Leave it there and just be. Let it be. And it will then be noticed. Not by you, not by me. We are not noticing it. Why? We're not going to have to notice it. We don't have to notice it. We don't have to know it. Because they're already being that. Being that which what we are, which is energy. An energetic movement of energy. It doesn't need to be known, and there's nothing that has to be applied to it, because it's already, there are no applications required to simply be. Yeah? Personal and impersonal presence. We are and we are not. Absolutely everything is and it isn't. There it is. Simply this. Empty fullness, the beloved. Unconditional love, spacious aliveness. Call it what you will using the English language. And just because you call it doesn't make it so. You're already being that anyway. So call it whatever. And you wouldn't be calling that for any reason, meaning, and purpose. Just to call it. Doesn't need to be called. There you go. And yet, we discuss about it. The reason why, if there's going to be a reason at all, was simply share the message that nobody is alone. Nobody is a separate human corporeal manifestation anywhere. It is appearing within the everywhereness of everywhere. The absolute everything that appears as it does, of its own accord and volition, and we're mingling with that. Let it be. That's it, right there. Enough's enough.
Are the dreaming of the dreaming. We're in the state of forgetting, not we. There's a state of forgetting that, and to me, the forgetting of that, you're here. If the forgetting of that is sufficiently there, you're here, as if you just parachuted in, and then as soon as you parachute in, it has a story. You've been here for 50 years, and you get just downloads. You get a huge download historically now. All day. It's just downloads all day. Yeah. So as soon as there's the act of being identified as the dreamt, that's your new starting point. So now you're starting from here, which we would like to say from what you're not. So, and it can go to such an absurd length that we enter a realm called spirituality, and a lot of people, knowing it or not knowing it, are in the act of being identified as self, looking for something, yes? But the funny thing is, just like if you're in the act of being identified as self and you're looking for a coffee, you can get it. You're looking for a date, you may get it. You're looking for some money, you may be able to get it. You're looking for a sandwich, you can get it. That obviousness of, oh yeah, I can get basically anything, but can't be applied to what you are. If you are that, which is trying to get you are that, it won't work, yes? See, this is the dilemma. So the point is, I can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. I can't use mind to seek mind. And the assumption in these statements are, you're mind, you're Buddha, you're light. The master would be saying, hey, Paul, don't use the Buddha.
Energy.
You know, or Paul, don't use mind, or Paul, don't use light. You're doing it all day. But he's talking to the Buddha finally, and he's trying to say the Buddha. I know Buddha, aka Paul, but hopefully this gets through the Buddha. Hey Buddha, you can't use yourself to find yourself. It doesn't go 800 pages. It's just a simple little, you can't use yourself to find yourself. What
But you're already being
that,
so.
If that lands, so to speak. I don't know, find out. You know, hopefully.
And although self cannot get out of self, that's still really not
which it
self.
can conjure up
And
with
yet,
all of its interest and
it's temporarily,
managing and trying to
temporarily
promote itself.
a
It
self,
just
if
doesn't
you
win
call
here.
it that.
But maybe a loss of interest in all of its machinations would bring a lightness to it
But it's
that
just
it can't
energy,
seem
really.
to find as a product here. But maybe it could be an expression of lightness here. Yes. I humbly believe we are more of an expression than a finder and a loser and a getter and a haver and
manifestation.
adding on, becoming and on becoming and becoming. I
Expression,
feel more
manifestation.
we're an expression.
Right.
So let's say
But a
the
temporary
Buddha
one.
hears that, hey, I can't use yourself to find yourself. Suddenly the Buddha
This is
expresses
why
a
that
little
is
more
partial
Buddha
liberation.
into the dreaming,
Still
into
partial.
Paul, and then Paul gets the benefit
Why?
of expressing
Because what
the
you're not
light.
still
Now,
susceptible
Paul
to what?
knows in a very
Still
like,
susceptible to all the
moronic
dualities.
way, there's an
Persecute
understanding
me around
now
it.
of, oh, and then the brain is going to be claiming to be the one who's traveling lighter,
Yeah.
who must have done something to deserve this, or be one of the chosen ones, you know. But
The
now
gurus.
there's a clear understanding that I'm not that.
You get
yes?
trapped in that
So
trap
then the
of
lightness can seem
guruing.
to get more lightness. It doesn't get interrupted and again become a full-length mirror to see what you're not all day, you know? I'm the one who's light. I'm light. No, you just fucking, you lose all interest in that. You're just trucking around, doing whatever's happening. And it's so easily forgotten because it's not here. It just goes off like mist, you know? It's like we don't see, it's our interest and attention that's keeping the mist sort
Yeah,
of
it's giving
illuminated.
it its energy.
It could all get a little like dispersed and a little
And the mental thought
foggy.
system
And
craves
then
at
in
it.
that, not seeing this so
But it's
much,
not
you
an
can
actual
see,
parasite, you know, like
See.
a monster
So
hovering around.
claiming, all right, so the mental, I call it selfing, that's what I call it.
Yeah.
All right, so now, let's say you came in here and you listened to some talks, and now you think, oh, I think I know what selfing is. And then you'll probably, your head will arrive at, man, I'm doing a lot of selfing. Or the selfings drive me crazy. See, that's the demonstration of the selfing, the feeling of being the one who's doing it or being done to by it. Yes? You see? The selfing implies a self. I can see that it's worked in time when I'm talking to someone because then the self explains to me how much selfing has been doing.
That's fucked up.
I mean, it's so beautiful. Because somehow, I don't know how it happens,
boom.
the selfing, which is happening, is sort of used to imply
Yeah.
it's happening to someone, but then the someone immediately owns the activity.
steps
I've been
in.
fucking selfing.
Yeah.
I gotta call up, I'm gonna tell on myself, I've been selfing. No, you fucking haven't been selfing. The selfing has implied a self. And it's obviously seemed to have worked because now you're talking from the fucking self about the selfing.
Yeah.
So you try to point these little pitfalls out because it's like if you were in like a Vietnam or something, which I wasn't, and someone had navigated through the minefield, if you followed them, you wouldn't step on the mines, yeah? So there's lots of readings from great masters who try to cryptically or directly inform the Buddha, or inform what we are, to some of these pitfalls, so that when they
Address them,
happen,
yeah. Addressing
there's
the
not a
pitfalls.
complete recognition that it's happening to me. You know, there is a suspension of belief in the little magic trick. So you're sitting there, and then you start seeing a lot of what has always been implying you as what you're not. You see it. You see the activities.
That conjured self.
Yeah, and you don't see any difference in the activities here than there. It's the same system. It's like a stock model. All it has is each person, it's not a person, but let's say each stock model has a unique voice, like a different GPS, like English woman speaking or whatever. Yeah. But
Each
it's the
person
same
thought to be a
GPS.
person is
It's a failed
simply a
system.
human corporeal manifestation
All right,
of
so
appearance.
Now
Another way
you've
of saying
seen some of the pitfalls.
Our unit of
So
local
now
quality
you
consciousness.
realize, Jesus, what the head is constantly doing is it's looking for what it is from what it's
It'll
not.
adapt and it'll change and it'll appear
And suddenly,
based
you're
on
seeing this, you're seeing
how,
what you're not looking for what it is
however and whatever
from
arises.
itself. So
Of its
it's
own
you,
accord,
see? But what I'm not is actually what I am. So I see the exact breakdown of the story of what's looking is what you're looking for. Yeah? Instead of emphasizing the you and looking for what's looking, you see the you looking for what's looking from the what's looking. Yeah? As St. Francis attempted to switcheroo us. So suddenly, at the moment, you're in the idea that I'm looking for what's looking, and then suddenly someone whacks you, and you realize, what? That's what's looking. Yeah? And so what happens? All your plans and all your journeys and noble endeavors, they shrink up. They just, in the interest and attention.
They're not necessary. The knowings and doings are not necessary to be. Just be. Let it be.
Yes.
That's enough.
Yeah, Tuesday, exactly. Keep that up and things will go well. So, yes, just yes, a lightness will come about. And
Groundhog
exactly,
Day.
it's lightness, and it's not anyone's lightness. And you know what? That urge to try to why, it just dissipates completely.
Yeah.
You don't care.
Doesn't matter.
This isn't about getting a PhD.
Right.
It's about
Indeed.
losing complete interest.
It's nothing
in a lot
to do
of
with
stuff that
academia.
There was a lot of interest in, yes, and that interest being dispersed in other ways, and you're the better for it. You that you're what you're not is the better for it. And all the while, what you're not is inevitably what you are, and it's what you are dreaming, and it's going to dream itself out of the dreaming as what it's not. And the dream will get happier for what it's not.
Yeah.
And then
Dream
doesn't
will
mean
get happier for
eternal,
what
it's
it's
going
not.
to end.
Yeah.
And when it's supposedly, the Course would say, as it's getting happier, you better get ready because it's ending soon.
God, Lord.
So, yeah.
Wow.
And then we do the talks
And that's
everything
something.
just to support the idea.
Yeah.
Because I believe in invitation, and I definitely believe you can talk about nothing forever. Really.
Yeah.
You can talk about nothing forever. And an invitation can constantly be repeated.
Because infinitude and complexification contains the content of absolutely everything, and that it reaches a point where it's unknowable.
And then there's that switch. You know?
There's that which is knowable, and there's that which is unknowable.
You see what you're not, looking for
What's
what
knowable
you are
is in
from
space and
what
time.
you are. Instead of the
What's
other way.
unknowable
You know, the horses
is outside
in front of the
space and
car,
time.
Things make sense.
Infinity. Nobody can ever know that. What's unknowable. Let it be. Leave it alone. Let it be. It already
It
be.
verifies itself. Like for me, it was like an unspoken yes.
Go with the flow.
And
Whatever
over time
arises,
here,
it's going to arise anyway,
we call it the last answer.
regardless of what thoughts
In
are
the place of
applied.
time, the last
How it
answer is
arises,
a great
doesn't
answer.
mean-
It's
there is no
only
how, there's
really
no
a
why.
answer. Yes,
For everything to arise and appear as
that's
it
a
does.
damn good answer.
That's it.
I've
That
lost
has to
all
be enough.
interest in this topic.
That has to be enough. Just let it
I
be.
do. I'm absolutely, I mean, mental illness, I have mental illness, exactly. Mental interest, I have none in this topic at all. You know, I have a seat assignment and I'm always, the only, being what we are, the best we can do is get an intimation of it here. Yeah. So by seeing what you're not is an intimation of what you are. Because you're the seeing of what you're not, really. Intimation means you get a sense of it. You get a sense, almost like you feel a presence. Something's intimated. It can't be spelled out, but it's intimated. Yeah? So you
Personal
feel
presence
like,
and impersonal presence. That's that
by
energetic
seeing what
movement.
you're not, you get almost like a
It
glimpse
is being
of what
sensed
you
because it's the
are,
beingness
because
of
you're in
sensing.
the activity of being what you are. Which
See,
is
there it
seeing.
is, being what you are.
So,
The
and the activity
beingness.
of the seeing here
That's
is
non-local
seeing what
quality
it's not.
conscious energy. That is outside of space and time.
Because it's not a thing.
That's what we
That's
are.
why Poe, a great master,
We're that
said,
energy.
whatever can
That
be
energetic
perceived
movement.
can't be perceived. So basically,
There are no
everything
perceivers.
that you can see with these eyes,
Yeah, anything that's
are
perceiving,
seeing
right.
what you're not.
It's facilitating sight. That's all that's doing. Yeah.
So you get, it's
It's
the
a
whole
puppet.
idea of negation. So
Or the
you
camera.
negate, and when the negation is not a denial, but a clear, then there's an affirmation of what you are by seeing what you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? It's a big
Yeah.
whoop.
Yeah.
Not by, I've realized what I am.
No,
It's awakening to what you're not.
the absence
Because
of what you're
are
not,
already awake.
once that's no longer interfering with what you are, you get a
So
direct hit
you wake up
of what
from
you
what you're
truly are,
not.
which is non-local
The
quality
wake,
consciousness.
the dreaming of what you're not continues, but I'll tell you, it doesn't have,
No influence.
it's more like invisible ink now instead of
Yeah,
fucking
no longer.
blood of
Yeah,
the
it's-
first child.
It's more transparent, yeah.
You know, it's much easier, much easier to go with. So,
Yeah.
yeah, all right, nice to see you. Come back if you like. And then we have a nice thing on Saturday, which is a bigger one out in Marin. We go to coffee and eat and everything. We'll have a nice fellowship. But yeah, we'll be here for the next till April. I may be gone in March. No, I'll be here pretty much April. I'll be gone. So, but yeah, it's nice to meet you. What's your name? Zana. Nice to meet you, Zana. What caused you to find? How did you find us on the website?
Oh, yeah, on YouTube, and then I saw your Xanadu stuff. And, but before that, I listened to a lot of stuff from YouTube.
Yeah.
We first started, like, I told, and then we started going crazy on it.
Yeah.
And then I like Tony Carson, and
Yeah, I know.
I couldn't really register, and then I heard you just recently, and I thought, is it another way to, I kind of thought more, I like the part you said about denying, because I'm so good at that, and so turning it around is not denying, like seeing for what it is, and then realizing you're not yet, kind of did something for me there.
Good. Yeah. Well, negation is the way in this, and this came about because I went to satsangs, before 2000 or something. And this wasn't emphasized in my view. Because I remember I was in LA and someone asked me, well, you went to satsangs and that's what motivated you to talk. But it wasn't about what I heard, it was about what I wasn't hearing. That's what motivated me to
Oh,
share.
yeah.
Because how it was explained in me, whatever, was this act of claiming is so fast in time. Like if you hear that you're not a body, you're hearing it as a body. It doesn't go anywhere.
I'll tell you what really
Something-
works, though.
It's so quick
is-
that if you go the direction
See-
of trying to describe what we are as consciousness, what you're not's going to override it by being the hero.
Yeah, but see, we're a direct hit, and in a sense, this is what these monks are doing. These monks in Tibet, and as they're chanting and chanting and chanting, they are not doing that to acquire some other different experience other than beingness. They are beingness, but they are devoting. It's more of a devotion to it. Where, I tell you, here in the Western world, I say West, but further east from where West is thought to be. In America, I'm in the UK now, United Kingdom, been here since 2000, personal presence in Peterborough, United Kingdom. I know there's a Peterborough, Canada, but, and then when I saw Paul Hederman was in Peterborough, I said, oh, no, he was in Canada, that Peterborough. But anyway, that'd be cool. Cool to meet Paul someday. Don't know if it'll ever happen, but even if it doesn't, there's still that recognition there that what is being stated is truthful, it's honest, it's right on the mark. So, in a sense, you kind of notice that those that were on the seeking energy. Okay, they were seeking something that they were already all along. You know, as a seeker, as a sought, you're already that which had been seeking all along to find out ultimately that you kind of went full circle. Most seekers have probably touched upon this. And if looking at a timeline, I'm 56 now, and I can remember when I was in my early 20s, came across that book, this self-realization book here. And when I came across this, The Science of Self-Realization, I was reading this in my early 20s, and I'm 56 now. And you would think that I would have got a direct hit of recognizing what I'm not, which is this temporary manifestation of the body-mind, yeah? The character, kind of like an avatar, if you will, a puppet, camera. What we are is the camera operator, so to speak, using all these euphemisms and metaphors. Using these metaphors with the English language can be helpful. The trigger was looking into in 2016. That's where it really hit, it really triggered, and this occurred just by noticing the contrast between what Dr. Thomas Campbell had been mentioning and listening to the audiobook on Amazon Kindle. Well, there's audiobooks as well, but just after a few of those presentations and these podcasts that he continues to have to this day, he's an ex-NASA physicist, worked for NASA for a while, he's retired now, and he wrote this 3-book series about what he refers to as a big theory of everything. And he titled it My Big Theory of Everything, or My Big Toe, the acronym abbreviation for Theory of Everything Toe. And so back in 2016 I was looking into that. And then it gradually began to kind of move me back to what I've always been, which of course is non-local quiet consciousness energy. Not a particular name for it, or not a particular, process or study. No, it's just a direct hit what I've always been, which is energy, and I recognize that. And now, feels like there's this hand, inside the head, and it's making these words come out, blah, 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 it just sounds, and speaking the English language, yeah, it's still familiar, but it's as though this body mind feels like a puppet now, and all it's doing is just being. It's as though it's on autopilot now. It always was before, prior to this recognition of the collapse of a me that never really was there. That's why in those particular sayings of Jim Newman, that's why he refers to it's not even worth mentioning. And yet, although it's mentioned, he starts going into, of course, there is no you, there's no me, and there's simply this. And that has to be good enough. Good enough for what? Good enough for nobody. I mean, see, that's the thing. You could take it, you're not really taking it, but it can be stated using the English language to such a degree that it loses all meaning that was once applied to it. In other words, a separate sense of self has to have a purpose. Normally does, usually. It goes on a spiritual quest, and I can recall this separate sense of self that I had conjured and was going with the birth name and birthright thing. Birth certificate, that's me. I'm separate, I feel alone. Oh man, is anybody else looking at life the way I'm looking at it? man, my life seems so difficult, not realizing that it was never my life, and there was never a single me, an individual with a birth name and birthright that was going through my own life, and that I had free will and choice to decide how my life is going to turn out. So I had this idea that I was entertaining. And I can recall after getting out of this belief system about Christianity, because of course this body mind was exposed to it, and it's very, very strong in what is termed the Bible Belt states in the United States, around Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, northern parts of Florida there, Virginia's, going through the Carolinas, up there in Kentucky, Tennessee. All that area is considered the Bible Belt. And I wouldn't be surprised if one were to drive down IH-10. There's an interstate highway that goes all the way from coast to coast, from the West Coast, California, all the way to the East Coast, and winds up in Florida. And then right there, South Carolina, right there at the edge, the beaches there. And so if one were to travel through those states there, the southern, northern part of Florida, and then through Georgia, Alabama, all the way across to Texas, just those southeastern states right there, there's a concentration of a very strong, fundamental religious element. And you can hear on the AM band, AM radio, small radio station, there's a pastor, a missionary from a small little church in a small town, still speaking of the hell and fire damnation. You must go to church, you must confess your sins. The blood of Jesus Christ will cleanse your sins, and that kind of thing, the hellfire damnation kind of, belief of the old time is referred to old time religions. There's nothing in that. There truly, really isn't, because that belief, that right there, does not hold any substance as far as beingness. It has nothing to do with that. It doesn't appear to recognize any of those things, because it's steeped in this belief that that life is conditioned to where you must use life and take life as it comes, but then be sure to avoid all evil doings, do not harm anybody, follow the 10 Commandments, read that Bible through and through, and follow that because you don't want to wind up in hell when you die, kind of thing. See, so that was very strong in the upbringing of my generation. I was born in 1963, and there, in that Bible Belt, that area, I grew up in the tip of Texas there, Lower Rio Grande Valley in Harlingen. Spent 9 years. Was born in California, okay, and then moved in 1968 when I was 5 years of age. My daddy had a better job, got an offer. He was working at Pan American Airlines as a mechanic, and then he got offered a civil service job as a GS. I think he started out GS5 in Brownsville, Texas. So we moved over to Harlingen. He was born in San Benito. It's a real small town, just a few miles east of Harlingen. So anyway, all my family was there. When I say my family, that's the story of this body mind. Anyway, so my grandfather, grandmother, on both sides, my mom's side of the family and father's side of the family, all steeped in these beliefs. And it wasn't done on purpose. It didn't happen on purpose. It's just what was encountered. I just confronted that. And then started going to Sunday school. I was 6 years of age, 7, 8, 9 years of age. And then when we moved from Harlingen after about 9 years, almost 10, in 1977 we moved to San Antonio, Texas. And that is when the this recognition, realization, hey, wait a minute, there's more going on than just this Christianity that I grew up in and was raised in, that type of religious environment. Of course, it was Baptist, but it's still Christianity. It was just a different denomination. You know, you have Catholics, Baptists, Protestants, Lutherans, Seventh-day Adventists, and all these other denominations and branches. But it's still under the umbrella of Christianity. So, you know, when I was going to Sunday school, and I remember even in my innocence, the first time I questioned about the Cain and Abel story, and I remember, I'll never forget it, because when you're a child and you get scolded by an adult, man, you never forget that. It's in your innocence, you know. You're 6, 7 years of age, and you're asking an adult a question, and you hope that they don't get angry if you ask it. Well, I never asked again, that's for sure. And then I just really pondered on it. And I was only like 7, 8 years of age. And it was just an innocent question I had for the Sunday school teacher. So they were teaching the story about Cain and Abel, about the Garden of Eden, it was paradise. And then Cain was jealous of the father of God's favor. He favored Abel because Abel was following the 10 Commandments to the letter, to the T. And Cain became very jealous of that and somehow influenced. And so he kills his brother Abel, tries to cover it up, you know, tries to dig a grave. And then somehow the Father, God, comes around and goes, where is your brother Abel, Cain? His blood cries out from the earth. No, I don't know where he is. And so he lied. And then the Creator, God, said, for this great sin, then you must be banished from the Garden of Eden and you can never return. And so he was banished from the Garden of Eden. And east of Eden was a place biblically mentioned called Nod. Okay, and then Adam and Eve, of course, his parents, you know, and then he came back to the area where they were in this garden some years later, and he brought with him a woman. He had a partner with him when he came back to visit his parents. So my question simply was, if there was just Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and that's all the only people that were there until they began to populate the earth, and it expanded from there, where did he find this woman? If there was only these people, just a few people there, just one first family. And then I remember the Sunday school teacher pointed a finger at me and said, how dare you question the Word of God? You never do that. You just follow and believe what it says in the Bible, and that's it. And she kind of scolded me, but I took it, I took it to heart, and I was kind of put the fear in me and scared. I became kind of uneasy about it, scared about it. And so, in that innocence, when an adult scolds you, you really feel it strongly when you're a child and you're innocent to it, to the world. You're still learning. You're still trying to figure out, what is this life all about? What's going on here? Who am I? All that sort of thing. But then those great questions I was asking, even into my teenage years, my early 20s, and this body-mind was very, very curious, extremely curious, and so it was automatically going to seek anyway. And I felt that, wow, there was no internet as well. Can you imagine? Of course not your generation can't imagine a world without the internet. But I was from that generation. So those body-minds that grew up in the United States or even the United Kingdom around this generation between 1955 all the way up to 1965, that generation right there could probably relate to this story and remember a time when the world was that way. When I say the world, of course, society, that type of thing, So, yeah. It's interesting. And so this body mind had a very strong curiosity, seeking, especially ever since then. So, so that's how this Earth was populated. Adam was created from the dust of the earth, and then a rib was taken from him. So, because God saw how lonely Adam was, so He created woman. He created Eve out of his ribs. And this thing about ribs, I was trying to understand. Well, what does this mean? Why not explain it in a more believable sense? Not so much as like a story of saying rib, this, that, dust, and things like that. No, where is the explanation? I was looking for that. I couldn't find that, so I started studying comparative religions on my own. It became a freaking hobby, man. I started seeking. I was a very, very strong seeker. So, got into the New Age movement in the 1980s. I really got into the UFO thing. The UFO flat was very strong about unidentified flying objects. I looked into the Bermuda Triangle. I always thought anything that was paranormal, was beyond normal, was considered normal, and so anything supernatural, those type of things, just had some kind of a strong curiosity. I wanted to know more about that, and so that's what apparently appeared to have happened. The story of this body mind. I went through what I refer to as a spiritual quest. Came across that book, that self-realization book, though. That's The Science of Self-Realization, and of course the Bhagavad Gita as it is. See a direct translation. And that's a little excerpt in the back from Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, and Henry David Thoreau. And he put a caption here in the back. In the morning I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial by comparison. Yeah. And in a sense, yeah, if you look into this Gita is kind of similar to the Bible of the Christians, in a sense. If you look at it you could look at it that way. Because this Gita, it says the Gita as it is a direct translation from the Sanskrit to English, and so our only purpose is to present this Bhagavad Gita as it is in order to guide the conditioned student to the same purpose for which, it says here, Krishna descends to this planet once in a day of Brahma, or every 8,600,000,000 years. This purpose is stated in the Gita, and we have to accept it as it is, otherwise there is no point in trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita and its speaker, Lord Krishna. First spoke about the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some hundreds of millions of years ago. I remember reading this way back then. When was that? Yeah, it was in the 80s. First came across this. And there it was all along. The Advaita Vedanta. You see, Advaita Vedanta books, I didn't come across any of them back then. I was too into the New Age stuff. The New Age stuff was really strong back then as well. So I was really getting into that. The New Age, theosophy and Madame Blavatsky and philosophy and things like that. I was really looking into that sort of thing. And so, crystals and about Reiki, healing, and what else was strong in the 1990s? That kind of thing. UFO conferences and psychic fairs, Phoenix, Arizona, base of the South Mountains, back in 94. The first one I went to was 1994. Then in 1997, then again in 2001. I think that was the very last, It was the very last one I went to, and that had to do with the Wanderers. He even went through that stage, that phase of seeking about the star people and about the Wanderers, that they come from other parts of the universe, and they're just wandering about the universe, and they incarnate in Earth-like planets throughout the universe. And then I began to entertain that idea that I was so different than all of my friends that I ever knew in school and all the peers. I never met anybody that's quite the same way that I was in my way of thinking. So I latched on to that idea that, oh, I must be a star person. I must be a wanderer, like it's saying in the book. And Dr. Scott Mandelker came out with a book, Being E.T. in America from Elsewhere. So, and then Brad Steiger with the Star People series back in the 1970s. So I went through that phase. And when I say I went through it, this is a spiritual quest I thought I needed to go on, to be on, to figure all of this out. What is this life about? Yeah. That kind of thing. And so, but I do recall going through this, but it didn't really quite make sense. I revisit it now and it makes perfect sense. Isn't that unusual? I wonder if any other body mind ever experienced that, where they read a book years and years ago, it did not make a bit of sense. Then they put that book down and they go through some more years of seeking and looking into other literature and other beliefs and other types of traditions and spiritual teachings and all that sort of thing. And then years later come back to it, especially once this message about regarding Advaita Vedanta non-dualities strikes the core of the being, and then the collapse of that character or that sense of a separate self, as though, oh, I must be the birth name and birthright that I was told. I was given a name, so that's who I am. That's who I'll always be, and that's it. And then I was born, and then I'm going to die, and then I better be careful about what I believe in before I pass away, because I might be going to someplace else. You know, still taking that idea about, you know, the hellfire damnation. If you don't try to live a good life, the afterlife is going to be hell for you. It'll be nice if you have a good heart and you try to live life the best you knew how and not harm anything, and really mean it. I mean, honestly mean that wholeheartedly, that you could not, it doesn't even enter your mind, harming any other living thing, that you have a good heart. And that was thought to be good enough. But then there was this, I can't explain it, I can't put my finger on it, but there was this feeling as though, no, there's something else. I must be overlooking something. There must be some kind of book, some kind of literature, some group of people. And so I looked into the Edgar Cayce group back then, and you know, his prophesying about things and about all these other extraterrestrial beings throughout the universe, other Earth-like planets that had a head start closest to the galactic center. That there's other Earth-like planets there closer to the galactic center, the point of where the Big Bang started. But then closer to any Earth-like planet, solar system closer to the galactic center, had a head start as far as time goes. Millions and millions and millions of years ahead, as far as if you look at it as an evolutionary scale type of thing. But yeah, just remembering about that. It's funny how memory works. And I remember I used to find it difficult to pick up a book and spend a few hours flipping pages and reading it. I couldn't quite focus and concentrate on it very well. But when I would converse with other people, it was more of a lively communication between you and another body-mind complex action figure. I can't say another person anymore because I can't. I can no longer go and return. I can't return back to that separate sense of self. It's not even intentional. It wasn't intentional for that sense of a separate self to drop. To no longer be, it's no longer anywhere to be found. It's so hard to, so difficult to put into words to explain that energetic movement. Just fell away. Now there's just whatever apparently appears to happen. That's it. It's as though there's some other type of movement that's always been going on. It's sort of like and it's not that free will and choice that was once surmised and believed to be going on. There's no intent there. The intention and expectation and anticipation, in other words, of this idea of how my life should be. I remember that, how that felt. That why isn't my life turning out the way I want it to? So then I remember used to thinking that way, and the answer never came. The answer to that never came. It says, oh, well, you probably need to keep seeking. Look for this book or that book. Look for more information. Maybe you'll find the answer there. And so, I mean, just getting out of Christianity was the first leap. Getting out of a belief system like that was the first leap, so to speak, to go on this what I had referred to back then, before the collapse of this me, this separate sense of self, this I, this birth name and birthright. You know, the sense of a separate self. Before that collapse, I can recall thinking in terms of my life. Maybe I'm not finding the right books, the right literature. Maybe I need to keep reading some more and go to these bookstores. And back in the 80s, there was a bookstore called the Unlimited Thought bookstore. I think it's called the Life Enrichment Center now, San Antonio, Texas, off of Blanco Road. Blanco Road. Blanco is, of course, Spanish for black road. But anyway, Blanco. Because South Texas, of course, is very close to Mexico, and you know, most of the Hispanic people migrated and moved from Mexico. It's a big area there. But anyway, don't want to bore anybody out there. That's sure they don't want to hear about the story of this body mind, but that's a little bit of it. And yet, it was here all along. But the way it's written, though, it's very, very similar to, a religious book. So I thought, oh, well, this must be the religions of Hinduism. That's probably what this is. And it's still considered that, in a sense. So, in the first chapter is learning the science of the self, discovering the self. Who are you? Are you your body or your mind? Or are you something higher? Do you know who you are? Or do you merely think you know? And does it really matter? Our materialistic society, with its unenlightened leadership, has made it virtually taboo to inquire into our real higher self. See, this phrase higher self was used very strongly in the early 90s. This was kind of post-internet years. Right there towards the end of the 1980s and 1990s, around 92 and 93, 94, and then Windows 95 came out, first computer, and then It was America Online AOL, and it was the DSL. It was the yeah, it was the real slow internet connection, and yeah. And anyway, the New Age movement was still strong back then, and this idea about chakras and about 4 other subtle bodies. There's the causal body, there's the emotional body, there's the astral body. And I remember reading texts like that about the Kundalini effect and regarding the energetic movements like that, and that these chakra points spin these other more subtle bodies. And there wasn't just a physical body, you had more than that, and it's about this multidimensionality, that we're all multidimensional beings. And then it got into the extraterrestrials, and then there was these other Earth-like planets in the universe, and man, did it really spin. It began to sound like science fiction when you started looking into all these claims of Ashtar, the Ashtar Command, and what was the other one? The Pleiadians and the Syrians, and all these conjurings. Recognize that it was all conjured. Yeah, sure it was, but wow, I mean, these are really fanciful conjurings. They were during that New Age movement, New Age period of referred to Enlightenment, and Edgar Cayce, and prophets and prophecies and all that sort of thing. But just recognize that was all conjured. But anyway, and so instead we use our valuable time maintaining, decorating, and pampering the body for its own sake. Might there be an alternative? And so it goes on here. This very important Krishna consciousness movement is meant to save human society from spiritual death. At present, human society is being misled by leaders who are blind, for they do not know the aim and objective of human life, which is self-realization and the reestablishment of our lost relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the missing point. The Krishna consciousness movement is trying to enlighten human society in this important matter. So you see, so that right there, those words sound very similar to Christianity. In a sense, it is. It has that fundamental. It has that that theological flavor to it, the fundamentalistic religious flavor. Whenever certain words of the English language are used, phrases like that, like the term God and Godhead and hierarchy and angelic realm and the Nephilim, there's 4 angelic realms of this hierarchy of the Godhead. And even the Hebrews refer to that, the Kabbalistic tree, the tree of life. And then the 4 corners of the earth, the angels are taking care of the elements of the earth, fire, water, and the air, and that kind of thing. And the 7 seals in the New Testament writings, Christianity and things like that, prophecies, these modern times where information about the internet, that Daniel predicted that, he was a prophet that described that already, and that we're into I think it was referred to the 5th seal. Wait a little season, I think is what it says in there. Wait a little season until my return, of course, the second coming of Christ. And he's not going to return as the lamb, he's going to return as a lion, roaring with the truth and wiping out all evil for 1,000 years. And then he's going to unleash evil once more after 1,000 years. And then how did these stories are conjured? How did they become conjured that way? And where did this information come from? And then there's this claim, this alleged um, event that happened in Alexandria, Egypt, where one of the greatest libraries that ever existed, during the Council of Nicaea and the establishment of Constantine, the very first pope, was put into power, the Vatican. That's why Vatican City has its own laws to this day. And in the catacombs, allegedly, there are still scrolls that were seized by Roman soldiers when they destroyed that greatest library that ever existed in Alexandria, Egypt. The reason why they seized all the scrolls is because they wanted to establish the Roman Catholic Church, Catholicism, and that would have a certain degree of power over all the people back then. That's not how it is anymore. No. So they're being really quiet now. Notice that. You don't hear about the Pope going around the Pope mobile and then getting his ring kissed anymore. You don't hear about that, do you? And yet, we see a figure in non-duality circles such as Muji, and he's becoming worshipped similarly as the way that as a great guru, he has his feet kissed and people kneeling before him and weeping at his feet. No, that's not necessary. No body-mind complex is going to worship another body-mind complex as though it is greater than they are in some way, in a spiritual sense. No such thing. That is all conjured as well. And that stems from this crazy religious, spiritual ideals and thoughts, and as though, a saint is going to come and be born into the earth, and it also refers to, the evil and Satan, and then the fallen angel, and then is regrouping, he's trying to regroup an army, and he's a prince of the airways of the darkness, and all of these conjured ideas of heaven and hell, good and bad. There's duality. That's all that is. It's an extension of the idea of dualism, of duality. Good and evil, good versus evil, right and wrong. That's duality. And then this is where a majority of these beliefs stem from. They stem from dualism, duality. There's no unification that's mentioned. There's no non-separation mentioned there. There's this, as though there's these two opposing forces. And then it's that way throughout the universe. There's these warring factions of extraterrestrials, and then there's good aliens. There's good extraterrestrials. And then the good's fighting against, just like in Star Wars and that type of thing. I said, no, I would like to believe, if I was going to conjure anything at all, I would go with the Star Trek. So either a person could say they're a Trekkie or they're into Star Wars. One of the two. The Trekkies are into expansion or exploration, exploring strange new worlds, seeking out new life, new civilizations. Meanwhile, Star Wars is about warring factions, taking over other planets, other territories, conquering, dividing and conquering. That's Star Wars is about. But no, Star Trek is about trekking throughout the universe and exploring and encountering very unique, different types of human beings that exist on their own planet, and that they evolved in a very unique way, a lot different, but in some ways quite similar. So there's all these fanciful ideas and things like that, and children, of course, are really going to get into it, going to be sci-fi. And I remember I was a sci-fi fan of science fiction, and it was all about Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry's idea of that sort of thing. And so I remember after school watching programs like that in South Texas, where I grew up. Television, Gilligan's Island, and the Flintstones, and Hogan's Heroes, and Star Trek, A Night Gallery, and Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. Yeah, I was into those kind of programs. Even that young, 6, 7, 8 years of age, started getting into that, and my older brother and I, we grew up together, of course, there in Harlingen. My older sister, of course, she kept to herself, but But that was just us. I was the youngest of three in our family, and older brother and I used to look into the National Enquirer and the Guinness Book of World Records, and we always looked into about the UFO reports, things, cryptoids, and I remember there was, back in the 70s, a California condor got lost in a storm all the way from neighboring New Mexico, the neighboring state next to Texas. He got lost in a storm, wound up there in the valley, and then it was sighted out in the hill country, the areas outside of the town of Harlingen there. People that lived in these small, real small houses and mobile homes in the outskirts there. We're talking about a monster bird that when it opened its wings, it covered the tip of its wings, each end covered the entire road, and then it had glowing eyes. Well, that was that shine that happens whenever in the darkness, if you shine light onto its eyes, just that shine, doesn't it? But that monster bird was considered something out of this world. They thought it was a creature, a monster that like a dinosaur or something. They didn't understand it. The villagers never seen. They didn't know what a California condor was. And so I remember that article. And later on, there was a magazine called Fate magazine, and came across that issue that referred to. And this was years later in the 1980s. I came across that issue. They referred to this monster bird just simply turned out to be a California condor, but there's people that don't know. They don't know about large birds like that. They don't know what they're called, or they've never seen one before, because it's not indigenous to the lower Rio Grande Valley. Anyway, I know, going off in tangents like that. But, yeah. Now that it's recognized that everything's whole and complete just as it is, now we can just get on with the being. And just leave it at that, leave it there. So, this feels like it's going to be the last recording. Yeah. This will be it. So, you don't have to go over and over and over the same message about Advaita Vedanta as I already have. It's already been repeated over and over using the English language, and just going to simply continue to be redundant, and nothing's going to change. The same message as it's been for thousands of years. Non-separation, non-duality, Advaita Vedanta. Everything is simply this, whole, complete, and perfect. There is no single anybody anywhere to be found. There's simply appearances. And within the appearances it can appear as though there's content, but there isn't, because nothing is static. Nothing remains suspended anywhere. There's always constant energy flow, constant energy, motion, and movement. There's always a flow. And it will always be that way. Ad infinitum. It's always going to be this way. It won't change. The only changes would be based on the looking through what you're not. In other words, that perceiver that's facilitating sight. And that's temporary, looking out into the world. So the negation is to drop that. Because don't look at the world or reality from that which you are not, which is the body-mind. You're back here. This is what we are. We're the non-local quiet conscious energy field. We're the energy fields coming out of nowhere, from nothing. And then just temporarily manifesting in space and time, and we're not of space and time. Simple as that, isn't it? Yeah. We'll leave it there. Just let it be there. Let it be. And with the summary, once and for all, once last time will be said, stated, and recorded. All that is and all that is not. Empty fullness is apparently appearing as what is and what is not empty fullness, as that which is real and unreal, knowable and unknowable, observable and unobservable, for nobody, for no single person, anywhere to be found, and for no meaning, reason, and purpose other than of its own accord and volition ad infinitum.